every part of comics and artwork is a form of communication with other people. It's not just here, let me direct my thoughts at you as a dictation of concept, but it's hoping to convince you of how cool you think a visual could be or a story could be. And you're trying to communicate ideas in one part storytelling and greater part just graphic impact. You're hoping to relate a sense of energy, urgency, and enthusiasm to people. That there's a lightning of spirit that comes out of superheroes that has always worked for me. That it isn't really about the practicality of what they might do. It's not the practicality about grown men punching each other in costumes. It really isn't about that. It's a visual metaphor. And that metaphor could be for a lot of things, but it's mostly just about the energy and enthusiasm that can be found in the fun of life.
Word Balloon, celebrating 16 years of excellence for you.
Ironside will not be seen tonight, so we may bring you the following special program.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. Good to see everybody. John Suntress here. Good to see Tom King. How are you, man?
I'm doing super well. Thank you for having me on, John. I feel like I see you more than I see my children.
I know.
I'm on this podcast more than I'm writing comics. First of all, I apologize to everyone who has to hear my stupid voice again.
Oh, shut up.
My apologies.
I apologize that I'm late. It was totally my fault, but we're good now. Tom had a big week. Supergirl out.
Woohoo!
I'm all caught up, but now I'm forgetting if the other books was Strange Adventures new this week.
I've had a bunch in a row, which is odd because I have gaps because a lot of my comics are bi-monthly. But just recently we had Strange Adventures 10, which was a huge issue.
Oh yeah,
because that was the big twist reveal, and we had Rorschach 9 which was the beginning of the end of Rorschach. This is the start of sort of the unraveling of the mystery.
Yep.
And then that was followed by Batcat 5. Yeah, they all came out one after another.
Yeah.
I had a bunch of weeks. Batcat 5, which wasn't a particularly monumental issue, but it was a beautiful issue, a very good issue. I love it.
Oh yeah.
And then that followed Supergirl 1. So yeah, 4 weeks in a row of me. And then I'm going to disappear for another 2 months, so you won't see me.
Is it really going to be that long before the next issues? Okay, fair enough.
Rorschach should come out. Rorschach will be the next one. That'll be
in July, maybe. July.
Rorschach is still monthly, and Jorge is screaming far ahead and is drawing his heart out. And so that Rorschach will be 12 issues in 12 months. The first time I've done that since Sheriff of Babylon. And
wow.
Yeah. It's. I mean, on Batman, I guess we would do 24 issues in 12 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, the first mini series I have where we came out just month after month after month, and where we hit every deadline. So
I understand.
So unlike the original Watchmen, slack off Dave, Jorge actually put it together. So I know everyone when they read Watchmen, their first thought is, "Man, those last issues were late. I'm not going to read these things." That's sort of their. So we won't have that about my thing. So yes. So the next thing, Rorschach will be out next, and then Supergirl, and then we'll see about Strange Adventures and Batcat comes out first.
Okay, questions are filling up, and we'll certainly get to them. But I suppose we should get this out of the way because there was big news this week regarding Batman on the Harley Quinn cartoon and DC's
Is it all about that? Is every single question on this topic?
No, just one, and I'm surprised that we only have one. But Magic K does want to ask, will your Batman go down for Catwoman in Batcat?
Okay, so you know what this looks like to me, to my little brother? This is a trap. I feel like the whole internet is trying to trap me. What you guys saw, and whoever leaked it, or media or whatever, was the thing where the corporation said, we don't want to talk about this. And then it came out. And then you guys ask a guy who works for the corporation. And look, I love you. I love my audience. I love my readers. That corporation puts actual food on the table and puts my kids through a beautiful Quaker school that I love. And
is it really a Quaker school?
Yeah, I send my kids to a Quaker school.
Good.
They're all
That's
peace,
all right.
love, and understanding. My children. Yeah. It's a little school in Maryland. I love it. And buys me all this beautiful art. So I'm gonna. So when the corporation says don't comment, Tom, I'm not commenting. No one has written more sex scenes in Batman than I have.
That's what I was going to say.
I heard the current world record for Bat-Cat sex scenes. I have a little plaque. I keep it up on my wall. It's with a dirty picture next to it. But on my so if you read my Batman, there's plenty of reward in that area. But
yeah,
but I'm gonna stay out of this debate so I don't get my head chopped off.
So the books speak for themselves, and I will say again, this is me saying, it seems to me reading Tom's Batman run that Batman and Catwoman are a highly sexualized couple. That's it.
They have a good time together.
Yes.
Yes.
If the question comes up again, I will refer everyone to the beginning of this conversation. And in the meantime, we will move on to other questions here.
And as soon as Marvel hires me, it'll just be all superhero sex lives I'll talk about.
Brian Pulverenti asked Tom if he could tell us anything, even if only the genre, about his upcoming prose work and creator-owned comics. Please and thank you.
Well, the prose thing is this. So when I was first started out and I wrote my first novel, Once Crowded Sky. If anyone's ever done a novel before, it's not like comics, which is a much better system. When you write a novel, say someone says, yes, I'll publish it, which is, I got Simon & Schuster said they'll publish my novel. So I was as a nobody, I was a stay-at-home father at the time. And not that I'm a somebody now, but I mean, I was like in publishing, nobody knew my name. Then they publish it, but that takes like a year and a half.
Yeah. So
it's a big gap. You get paid at the beginning, they have a big chunk, you're sort of advanced, and then you don't get paid at all. So in that year and a half, rather than just sort of sit around and wait for myself for this book to come out and become a bestseller, which by the way, it did not become a bestseller. Nobody bought that book. I wrote another novel. And then the book came out. It was a big flop. That's like, okay, good. I got another novel to sell. And then they're like, well, you already wrote a flop. Why would we want your second flop? That's 2 flops in a row.
Ouch.
So that novel, I put on a shelf and I said, nobody's buying this. It stinks. I wrote a third novel while I was waiting for them to reject the second novel. That was Sheriff of Babylon. And so what happened was eventually Vertigo came in and said they wanted to do that idea as a concept. I had already written as a novel, and I just translated the novel to the book. So that's what Sheriff is my third novel, although it's not. So on my computer, there's a novelization of that Sheriff of Babylon. It's called Sheriff of Baghdad because we had our original title.
Right.
But that second novel, the one in between, has been sitting on my computer for 10 years. It's between Crowd Sky and Sheriff. And it's in the genre. It's I don't know. It's war. It's a war book. It's about my time. Sheriff was about my time in Iraq. This is about my time sort of on the Pak-Afghan border, where I had been back. I could not write this book today. I was writing this in 2010.
Okay.
And I was there in 2007. So I was only 3 years away from the experience. Whereas now I'm 17 years away from the experience. No, sorry, that's 13 years. Yeah, 14. Sorry. I'm not a math major. I
was told there'd be no math today.
Yeah,
that's always my answer. Yes.
I just sort of abandoned this book for 10 years, and I opened it up and I started reading it, and I was like, I love this. It's very well written. It's very. I mean, clearly, I love Once Crowded Sky, but I look at it as me sort of learning to write. By the time I got to the second book, I knew how to write, and I was using sort of and the language is crisp and the idea is good. And now back when I was trying to sell that book, I literally had 200 Twitter followers. Now I have significantly more.
Yes.
And I have some awards and I have some success and what they call in business a platform, which is they're all looking for, because that way they don't have to market your book. You can market it for you.
Sure.
And so I told my agent, I said, I read this again. I loved it. Can we go back out with it? And he said, yes. So we're going back out with this novel that I love. And it's a war novel. It's like The Things They Carried, the famous a book about Vietnam, but this one's about the war on terror.
Wow.
Think of it that way.
Cool.
And so that's my prose
would you say
thing.
military espionage? What would you say?
Yeah,
or just much like Baghdad, kind of the life during the Pakistan Afghanistan conflict.
It's sort of. I think it's more like Platoon. Those kind of movies about Vietnam, like that came out when I was a kid. For some reason, we don't have. We're the distance now from those Iraq-Afghan wars that we were Vietnam when those movies like Platoon. It's in sort of that genre. That's sort of like war is crazy kind of genre.
Okay, cool.
War makes you insane, or kind of thing. And it's a very close examination by someone who was there.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess that's the genre.
Cool. That's great.
Hopefully somebody buys it. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So it's on the market now to be published.
Agent is shopping it to the publishers right now.
Understood.
And again, unlike comics, I say to my agent, "Hey, can you shop this around?" He goes, "Yep, I can shop that around." In 7 months back, it's supposed to comics like, "Hey, does anyone want Booster Gold?" Yeah, Tom, write that. And that's why I love comics, because it moves.
I understand. I get it.
So that's that. The creator owned. I can't basically talk about it all, because if I don't want to even give away the genre, because the genre is very special. But I can tell you that it's written. I spent the last 4 weeks writing it, so the first trade is done, and the first issue has been drawn, and I just saw the colors today, and it's beautiful, and it's unique. It's something. When we pitched it to Eric Stevens, who's famously the head of Image Comics, not that we would go to Image, but I probably shouldn't say that. But when we were pitching it around to anybody, they said that this was something they'd never seen before. So it's something different. It's a new kind of concept.
Wow, that's great. I'm sorry, did I miss who drew it, or is that?
I haven't announced it. Hasn't been. It's under wraps. Yeah.
No problem, buddy. You know that. That's fine.
I'll let you know. But yeah.
All right. No worries.
It's super cool. Yeah, we've already had offers from Hollywood for it, which is crazy.
Very cool.
That nobody's even seen.
Well, tying into your novel, Greg McKeon wants to know, you must have met some interesting individuals during your time as a case officer. Did any of the assets you handled make a big impression on you, or any of the comic characters you've written?
Man, that is some good lingo, doing case officer and assets. That's like right down the foot. Yes. It's especially Sheriff, where Nasser was very much based on someone, and Sophia was based on someone. But yeah, very, very much so. I met, overseas, the poorest of the poor people. And when I mean like, you go to a country where there's just never been wealth, and you find the poorest people there. And also the richest of the rich people who live in castles in the sky that in America we can't imagine, except if you're Jeff Bezos.
Wow.
And everyone in between, from princes to heads of state to, it was a hell of an experience for a guy in his 20s, where you just kind of, but that's why I was, that's why I had a talent for it, because I grew up a man in sort of a bunch of different worlds. That was kind of my personality growing up. My mother's Jewish, my father's Protestant, and then boy, you couldn't picture two different families. My parents utterly despised each other. But you go to my grandma's house, and where I half grew up, which was an hour south in LA, in Orange County, on the edge of Orange County and Santa Ana, and it was like going back to 1952. You get a head of lettuce with a side of mayonnaise. It was Midwest all the way. Nobody talked at the meal, and it was just very much white bread middle class. Whereas you go to my mother's family, and it's these are Queens and Bronx Jews. Everybody's arguing with everybody else over this and that, and politics is this and politics, and you're just screaming at each other across the table over something that happened in the family tweet, and half of it's in Yiddish, so you're getting that. So, and I also had the odd. I was as a kid, my mother as a kid was a school teacher. Then she went to Harvard Law School after my dad left all by herself. And then she was in a lot of debt for that. And she had 2 children. So we were very poor at that time, generally sort of struggling. And then she rose as an executive at Warner Brothers and became very wealthy. So I sort of also, as a kid, I lived poor, but as more of an adult, we went to fancy restaurants. So I'd lived in a lot of different worlds growing up, which was very useful to me. And I also grew up in a very mixed neighborhood in Los Angeles. It was neither white nor black or anything, or Hispanic, or it was very
interracial.
It was very interracial. Yeah, there was no majority at my high school or at any school. So that was very good for sort of getting along with all sorts of people in the CIA.
That's cool. And Greg also wanted to know if any of those influences, if any of that influenced your take on specifically any of the Batman rogues.
Gosh, I don't know, specifically on the Batman rogues. I think sometimes I add a calm to my people, because when I've seen really evil, when I encountered like the real bad people, they always seemed very calm. There was never a panic to them. There's never sort of a giggle or a laugh I always have trouble writing those over the top scenes where it's like, now I've conquered the world, just typical comic book stuff, which you have to write every once in a while. That's part of our job description. I don't fault people for writing it, but I tend to write like my Joker he's not like, I did the whole Joker thing where he doesn't laugh the whole time. And even in Batcat, the Joker, he's not hysterical. He's just kind of quietly crazy. So I think probably that's really influencing me, that the people I saw who were doing some really, really bad crap, when I sat down with them, they were generally low key. I don't know. They were just kind of like, yeah, I did bad crap. I don't know. Yeah, they weren't, I don't know. They weren't proud of, they had a pride, but it was like when you see Putin on TV, Putin is an evil human being. I think we can, sorry about that. Don't censor this, but he seems very evil to me. No. But he's always calm, man. He's the chillest guy in the world, right? He's not cackling. He's just sitting there being like, yeah, I'm totally evil, but I deny all of it. Ha ha. It's like that.
No, he's calculating. You're right.
That's been my experience when I was dealing with sort of guys who had done some bad shit.
Okay. All right. Interesting. 64-page special says, hey, Tom, did you know Kirby had big, meaty hands when you did the Walk of Fame scene in Mr. Miracle? I don't know what that means, but I like it.
There's a scene in Mr. Miracle. It's I assume he's referring to where they go to the Chinese theater.
Grauman's, yeah.
Grauman's,
I don't know what
Chinese
it's called now, but yeah, back in the day it was Grauman's. Yeah,
Grauman's. Which I grew up in LA again, so I went there when I was a kid a lot.
Sure.
And a thing you do there is there's all these old movie stars, and they put their hands in the concrete.
Yeah, the handprints. Yeah.
Yeah, and you put your handprints. And I made up a fictional. So I made up a thing. In my thing, Barbara and Scott are celebrities. They're escape artist celebrities. Yeah. And so I did a thing where they were doing their moment where they were putting their hands in, and Scott notices next to him, he sees Jack Kirby, because Jack Kirby would be, he's like Walt Disney, right? He should be there with everyone else.
He should be there.
And Scott puts his hand inside Jack Kirby's hand, and of course Jack Kirby is his creator.
Right.
He doesn't quite. His hand is not as big as Jack Kirby's. It's like not quite. I don't match up to the person who created me. It's kind of like both my father and my God. I'm not quite where I wanted. It's kind of a symbolic. Right.
Yeah, I like that. No, that's awesome, man. I think it's just called the Chinese Theater these days.
Is it just? Oh, there you go. I think it's Grauman's Chinese Theater.
Dave's Chinese Theater. I'm not really sure exactly. Did I ever tell you one of our sponsors of our radio station, especially when we first started, we had a lot of local businesses, and we had a restaurant that literally was, just as the title suggests, Luigi's of Hong Kong. And it was half Italian, half Chinese food. So if you wanted egg rolls with your lasagna, it could happen.
Can I say I would go to Luigi's of Hong Kong because my youngest eats like 7 foods, and one of them is pizza. So if we go out to a Chinese restaurant, you're just having a temper tantrum. So if I could go to Luigi's in Hong Kong, I could get some beef with broccoli and also get a pizza for my kids.
That is so true.
I would be all over Luigi's in Hong Kong.
Honestly, it's no longer in existence. We loved it, and we all, especially when we were all young, barely employed producers and stuff, we totally would go to Luigi's because they gave us free food, but it was fantastic. So that's hilarious. Peter wants to know, Bicer, if there, and although he says 2020, but I know he means 2021, any convention plans this year?
Yes, I just signed on to 5 conventions, and I immediately want to withdraw from all of them.
Are you going to Connecticut or no?
I didn't get invited to Connecticut.
Ah.
No invite for Connecticut. So
that's my first one back.
I guess. Yeah, I've I don't know if I would have gone or not. But yeah, it was not in my. It was. I don't know what it is. I have a con agent. So he deals with all this stuff. A guy, Doug, he's famous. He's like everybody's con agent.
Doug Peters.
Doug Peters. Yeah, it's a very nice guy. And so Doug sends me a list of the people who, these are the cons that we think you should go to. He probably has a calculation in his head that I don't even understand. So I agreed to 5 of them. It was very nice. Yeah, I was invited to a bunch. And so I did my first signing this week. It was not that scary. It's a little scary. Just the social part of it is scary. I've been sitting at home, not talking to people.
Yeah, for 15 months, sure.
For 15 months. And so to talk to whatever it was, 200 people in a row, I had to get used to it. It's always, you can't shake their hand to establish it. And, but we did it. We did it. We had a good signing. I want to do more of them. It's possible. It was wonderful being back. It was weird realizing people read your stuff. I put in when I signed something for the first time, like the first time I signed a comic book, like a Rorschach 7 or something, and I just had never. Cause I put a number 1 on it just so people have that because I'll know I'll sign it for 5,000 more times. I've never done so many number 1s because I've taken like a year off from signing. So every comic people were handing me, I was like, oh, I've never signed this before. I've never signed this before.
That's great.
So yeah, it was weird because I did it. I halfway through the pandemic, I did a signing in Philadelphia for the election day, trying to get out the vote.
Oh wow, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Of course you did.
And so I had done one right in the middle, and I think Rorschach 1 had come out at that point. So I signed, but anything after Rorschach 1 and I think Strange Adventures 2, I hadn't signed at all. So all of Batcat, basically all of Strange Adventures, all of them.
Yeah, Doug helped us set up the Batcat Black Friday event that we did. So you were doing those virtually.
Yeah,
you signed some number 1s for that. But that wasn't in person.
Yeah, I got boxes that I signed, and send off, but not in person. Yeah,
no. No, I understand. Yeah. So do you want to say the cities you're going to be at, or is that still?
No, I think they're in charge of announcing. Okay. So I will say this. One of them is in Florida, and I'm reading in the papers about how badly Florida's doing with their vaccine. Get your shit together, Florida, because I'm not coming unless you get your shit together.
I understand. No, I get it, man. I know. Isn't it weird? I mean, luckily in Illinois, and Illinois is doing okay. Surprisingly, Chicago is only at 50% with vaccines. And they've lifted the mask ban and stuff, and I'm vaccinated, so I feel comfortable going out, but it's only been the last few weeks. It is weird. It's walking on the moon, as the police would say. I mean, it is kind of strange, but it does feel good to feel like summer again. 2 Fridays ago, I went to grab food at a place, and the place I went is surrounded by bars, and it was really great to see people at the bars in line to get in the clubs. And it felt like a real Friday again. And it was like, wow, I haven't had this feeling in, again, 15 months. And of course, you and I know we were at the last Comic-Con of 2020, C2E2. It's so funny. I think it was Ron Friends was asking me about it. And I was telling him how you and I were calling each other the week after the con. And it's like, I don't feel well. I don't think I have it, but I don't know what's going on. And we really were both like panicking to each other on the phone. And I think you were the same way. It really wasn't until that Friday, a week after the con, where I'm like, all right, I feel better. All right, I don't have it. But I mean, I felt foolish the entire week, and I'm like, oh no, I've got it. Oh my God.
I do. It was a year of that. It was a whole year of that.
Really, man?
It was just Yeah, dude. Do you think I write about mental health because I just like
I
the
know.
topic? That's fucking me.
I know.
It was a year of like every time I coughed or I had a thing in my throat and being like, "Oh no, I'm dying. I'm dead. This is the end of me." I used to have a formula where I would go in the shower and I'd write number 7. I was like, okay, every day I'm going to take this down because I figure after a week, if you're not having a fever every day, you didn't have it. And I was like, okay, once I get through a week, yeah, dude, oh man, I fucking hate this year. I don't want to talk about it. I'm a writer. I don't want to ever write about it. I don't want to watch stuff. I don't want to watch like that Bo Burnham special that everyone's talking about. I have no fucking interest in that.
Oh,
that
interesting.
I don't want to even look at it. I want to deny it that it ever happened.
He is a genius. But no, it's funny. I forget who I was talking to, and they were saying that they kind of hate the TV shows that incorporated masks in their shows, like Blackish even had everybody wearing masks on at least 1 or 2 episodes. And I could see the comedy appeal of that, but I feel the same way, man. It's like, yeah, although I keep asking people how the year affected them and stuff, and I am interested in that. Yeah, I really am like, let's put this year in the past and get back to normal as quickly as possible in all areas. So, Chris Luncheon, good process question. He says, my daughter really dug Supergirl. Curious about the process, full script. Everly's stuff was amazing.
Yes, full script.
Or is it Evely?
I say Evely.
Okay.
I say Bill Quiss. I've never. She's in Brazil. I'm in America. Both countries have had a heck of a time with COVID, so I don't.
Indeed. God, Brazil. Good Lord. I mean, Rod Rice and I were talking about that, and he was telling me about Bonacero or whatever the hell his name is, and what a jerk he is.
Yeah, they have their own.
Yeah.
In some ways, they're a mirror. They were a mirror of us. So let's hope they come out of it like we did. So we've never met in person. We talk on email all the time. My scripts, I knew I was writing for her. I always try to. I haven't written for a script that wasn't for an artist in a long time. My scripts are full. Like if you read the Vision hardcover that has my scripts in the back, that's the same format I've always used. Yes, they're full scripts. In the terms of it goes panel 1, panel 2, it lines up. It's like this is 6 panels. I like never once that I've ever maybe like 30 scripts will I say something like maybe this is 2 or 3 panels, maybe it's this. It's always very lined out of which panel. But my descriptions are very minimal in terms of. I mean, I do this for a living. I've been doing this for 9 years. I'm not good at many things. I can't cook. I can't play basketball. I can't stop eating cookies at night. There are many things I can't do, but one thing I can do is I'm good at knowing like how much description to include and not include in a thing, and especially I work with the best artists in the world.
Yeah,
hands down. Like the guys I work with are just. When you're working with Clayman, we work with Mitch. When you're working with Doc, when you're working with like these are the best art. These are the best. There's a million people who want to draw in the world, and these guys sit on top of that pyramid. So I know when you work with Bill Quist, who's another person who sits on top of that pyramid, like I know how much room to give them and how much not to give them, and they should get all the credit because I give them a lot of room. So, I mean, there's a panel in there where Bill Quist has this beautiful pulled back shot where she's showing this long pier in this alien world. There's an alien sun. And I swear to God, I think the panel description was, Supergirl on a pier. Like it's very simple. It's stuff like that. I make it so the story is told. My scripts a lot of scripts, like scripts are essentially, I'm sure I've said this before, but what the hell? They're weird because in Hollywood, scripts are scripts. They're things that are meant for a lot of different people to read and go through, and so they all need to be formatted a certain way so everybody's speaking the same language. Comics aren't like that because a script is basically a letter to your artist on what the book should look like. And along the way, your editor is going to look in on that letter. So like, there's only there's 2 people who care about it. So if you and your artist are so incredibly simpatico, or hate each other, either way, like you're going to write a letter to that person that's different than you would write to anybody else. Like Keith Giffen's my favorite because he's the best ever. But like Keith would say, Paul Levitz would write a very detailed script. Keith would get the script for Legion of Superheroes, read it on the bus home, throw out the script, what he remembered he would draw. That's the best. That's the best. So the way I like to write my letters to my artists are to write a document that tells a story, but in panels, so that they can feel the tension of the page. A lot of people will write, I don't know how to put it. It's like they let their artist in on their thinking more than I do. Like who does this way? Like Scott does this way. Like if you read a script between Scott and Greg, Scott
Snyder and Greg Capullo, yeah.
I mean, Scott and Greg their minds are melded and they make the best comics. But Scott will be like, Greg, I'm thinking of this, but maybe this, and perhaps we'll do this thing. Remember when we did that thing? And here's some reference. And it's very much like he's talking to Greg in person. Like the two of them are sitting there having like a one-on-one, and he's like, maybe 3 panels, maybe 4. Here's some dialogue. I think like it's a beautiful sort of patter-pat. I don't write that way. I write like, here's a short story that happens to be in panels. When you read it, you'll know what it's about, and then you make your pictures of that short story. So I'm not like if I do a twist in the issue, even an artistic twist where it'd be like, and then at the end, it just reveals this is not Bane, it's in fact Kite Man. I won't tell the artist in the beginning, be like, hey, I just want you to know this is actually Kite Man, so draw it. I want the artist to see the twist when it comes, so that when they see that, they're like, oh, okay, so that's what he wants. The emotion I'm feeling now is the emotion that I want to the comics. So that's how I do my scripts. I stole it from, it's a little bit of Mark Waid, it's a little bit of Jeff Johns. So those are my big influences.
That's very funny. I obviously I had Mark Waid on the show earlier this week.
I listened to the whole damn thing.
Isn't he great? Honestly, it's like
I can listen to him all day.
So and it's funny you mentioned Giffen and Levitz doing Legion and stuff. Really interesting stuff that I had no idea. That can you believe the executives didn't get 5 years later and didn't understand why it was great? And it's like, oh my God, that's like one of the best Legion runs, I think.
It's my it's my personal favorite Legion. It's why I don't write the Legion, because people are like, why don't you write Legion? People are like, they already wrote what I would do. It'd be Legion, it'd be 5. Yeah.
That makes sense based on Mr. Miracle and Strange Adventures. So I absolutely can see that.
And I have that gargantuan $150 omnibus. Yeah, I bought it. It's one of those things you buy and you're like, I really want to read this, and then you put it in your lap and you're like, I can't read this, it's crushing my testicles.
I know, you have no circulation. I know, it's like, Jesus, my legs are purple. What the hell? All I was doing was reading comics. What the hell happened? I can't walk.
Those 19th century book holders that people put like the dictionary on, so you can just sort of flip through it while you're lecturing to monks,
My buddy bought I don't know if you've ever met Jimmy the Muscle. Jimmy the Muscle is one of Art and Franco's guys.
Jimmy the Muscle.
That's his nickname, and he's always there at their table. Very sweet guy, but will give this kind of stoic like appearance. And if someone is spending too much time and not letting him get to other people, it's like, all right, dude, get going. They got to talk to everybody else. But he has the Tasham DC 75th anniversary book or whenever it was come out, but he has the 1 volume.
Oh, God.
So he brings it to conventions and has writers and artists, sign it and stuff. And it's great. Some of the artists will do little drawings and stuff inside the book next to their portion of the book or whatever. But and I'm like, how the hell do you read it? Because I bought it in the volumes. I bought it in the separate volumes. Those are big enough. And he said he's like, oh, dude, try and read that on the toilet. And I'm serious. You can't, your legs go numb. And I'm like, yeah, believe it. And that's terrible. So here's Zach. Zach, go ahead. Interesting question. Would you ever have interest in writing a line-wide event?
No, I don't think I would. We've discussed this before. We discussed everything, John. So I think people are.
Oh, I didn't realize that questions come up. Sometimes I do forget.
Maybe I have, but I did Heroes in Crisis, which I liked, but was very controversial. I still love it. I still think it's one of the best things I've ever done. But some people don't like it. It happens.
Well, that wasn't line-wide though, in terms of tie-in books and everything else.
Right. But it could have been line-wide.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like. Had I sort of said to them, look, we're going to do this and this and organize this and this team should write this and this team should write that, and really, taking control of it from an editorial standpoint, which some writers can do amazingly well. Scott does that well. Donnie Cates does that stuff well.
Sure. Was that option given to you, possibly, for Heroes in Crisis?
I mean, the best way to say it was on the table, and no one was saying do it or don't do it.
Okay.
Like if I had pushed for it, like they would have said yes, and if I had pushed against it, they would have said no. Or like even the wedding, like people got mad because they thought the wedding. Oh, you made us buy all these crossovers for the wedding. I didn't do any crossovers for the wedding. There were 4 crossovers that Tim Seeley wrote that they sort of insisted the last second. And I'll always, if someone says Tim Seeley is going to write some shit, yes or no, I was like, yeah, Tim's my brother. And so, but like that, I mean, Tim and I didn't coordinate that at all. He's just, I trust him to write what he wants, and he wrote it.
Totally.
I'm terrible. I love writing. That's what I love more than anything. I just love sitting behind my keyboard. I like my brain dissolving. I like being in another world. Today I was writing a story that took place in 1968 in Greenwich Village, and I was freaking there, man. I was using this crappy lingo, and I was saying, man, that's far out. That's hep, and I was and I was wearing, like this, big shirt that flares everywhere, and a medallion, and I was walking and I was looking left and looking right, and I was like, what did my character say? Like I was in it, and that's just, it's such a joy. That is such a joy to do. That's why I'm in this industry. And I'm absolutely terrible at telling people like, okay, like you had Josh Williamson. Josh Williamson, one of my dearest friends. Good man. And he was telling you about all the sort of things he was doing. And he's like, yeah, I gave this guy this idea and this guy this. And Josh is so good at that, but I'm no good at being like, okay, here's a little idea. Because I just, my brain just, if it has a story, it's like, I don't know what the story is until I dive inside it and look around and see what's going on. I can't sort of tell you what it is until I do it. So I'm no good at telling other people how to write. And the reverse of that is I'm terrible at people telling me what to write. Not that I love doing crossovers. That's not true. I've won an Eisner for crossovers, but but I don't like, like, okay, Tom, we've got these 6 things and these events here. So you've already written this story and you've already entered that world and told us what happened, but we can't do that anymore because of this and this and this. That's when, as a writer, I get super frustrated when I have to sort of make things not true that I think are true. That's when I sort of. So I think when you do a line-wide crossover, you're getting into, unless you're much better. It's my weakness. It's not the industry's weakness. I'm just not good at it, and I don't. I mean, I just listened to your Mark Waid interview, right? And he was like, I talked to Keith, and Keith told me the secret in comics was to find what you're good at and make yourself essential and keep doing that thing. And I was like, that's 100% true. Keith is a guru of comics, and so that's just not something that I think I'm particularly good at. And I wouldn't want to waste your time with something I'm bad at.
I understand. Peter Beiser, I'm not putting your question up because you want to know if Batman goes down on Catwoman. I will say we covered that in the first 5 minutes of the talk. I would direct you that once this is over to rewind, and you'll get Tom's answer to that question. But we'll see how many more times it comes up, and if it does, this will be our answer. So we're moving forward. Let's see here.
But I appreciate it. You know what I appreciate? I appreciate all the Batcat energy. There is so much Batcat energy in the world. I'm writing a book called Batman Catwoman. So, yes, keep the Batcat energy coming. Whatever drives it forward, I'm good with.
There you go. Trumbo Gun 1. I'm loving Rorschach. I could not have possibly predicted where it would go. How did you come to your approach to the book? And I love the fact that Columbo is a character in Rorschach. That's me saying that. I have no idea who that person is. But sure. It certainly looks very familiar to me. The only thing that's missing is that voice and him saying, I don't mean to bother you, miss. I don't mean to bother you, sir.
No
I just got a couple more questions. I love Falk. You know that. How often are we just talking and Columbo? Same thing with the Benson sisters. We can't help it. And now Gabe Hardman told me last night he's rewatching Columbo. So you can't help it, man. It always comes back to Columbo.
I was this close to pitching a new Columbo series. I was this close, John. They called me on a Friday, and I called you, and on a Monday it was gone.
This conversation I remember. But honestly, Tom, I don't know if you can do Columbo without Peter Falk. I really don't. I mean, there are certain characters that really belong to the actors that played them. And God, we just saw it with Han Solo, for God's sake.
Can I give you? Well, we'll get back to that. It's a great Rorschach question, but can I give you a Peter Falk moment that I had?
Please.
Saw? I saw the Muppet Caper.
Yes.
Peter Falk's cameo in that, which is about 2 minutes long. It might be. I've seen so many movies. I've seen so many comedies. That might be the funniest 2 minutes of movie in the history of movies. Is Peter Falk's Muppet Caper's cameo? When he goes up to Kermit, and Kermit's like feeling sad, and Peter Falk. He's like, look, I know exactly what you're going through, and Kermit's like, you do, and he's you do, and I can do a Kermit voice. He's like, yeah, let me tell you what happened. And then he tells him this long story about two arguing cleaners and how two brothers are going to both, and it's so specific. And at the very
Nothing
end,
to do with what Kermit's
Kermit
doing.
just looks at him. He's like, you have no idea what you're talking about. That has absolutely nothing to do. It's literally like a 5-minute monologue about like this long story about two battling cleaners in New York City.
Yeah.
It is utter comedy perfection.
And for me, honestly, it's the Wim Wenders Wings of Desire. And I mean, it's so great. And for people who don't know, it's an angel who has become human and, walking among the people, but also he can still be an angel at times. And while he's an angel and people can't see him, Peter Falk senses he's there, and plays essentially himself in Germany making a movie. And he has these wonderful one-sided conversations with the angel. And it's just like, it's so quintessential Peter Falk, Lieutenant Columbo, whatever you want. Because again, I think at the end of the day, it really is Peter Falk pretending to be a detective. But essentially, it's just, we're watching Peter Falk. It's great. Gabe had no idea that the 90s ABC TV Columbo movies existed. And don't get me wrong, they don't compare to the classic NBC stories. But there are moments in them that I'm glad I've seen them all. And I would even say the Dabney Coleman one from the 90s is still a pretty legitimate Columbo story. Oh, really? And I also think the one with Patrick McGowan from the 90s is actually very good too.
Patrick McGowan one from the 90s?
Yeah. It was around that Braveheart time of his career. I mean, he is really old looking, and he was really old at the time. But it was great. But yeah, I still say if you're
Patrick McGowan was Mel Gibson's dad in Braveheart. Is that what you just told me?
He was the king. He was Leathershanks or whatever.
Oh, he was the king?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. And again, you may not know because he had a beard, and
No, I never put two and two together.
See, again, right under Peter Falk, McGowan is one of my actors that pretty much everything he ever did, he has my attention because he was so great. So. Let's see here. Raphael, we've already
answered the Rorschach question, John.
Oh, excuse me.
We went up on Peter Falk for some reason.
I'm just getting started. So yes.
The inspiration for Rorschach. So that was a tough thread to needle. Because Rorschach, I don't know if you guys have read The Watchmen, but he's dead at the end of it.
Yes.
And so you, as a writer, you're faced with sort of two options. You can either bring him back to life, which seems like, I'm sure people think I'm already pissing on Alan Moore, but that would be like shitting on him and pissing at the same time.
Yes.
Like it just seems so wrong to bring him back to life because he has a very iconic death.
Yeah.
Or you can sort of make up a new Rorschach, which seems to me to be sort of less interesting. To sort of just be like, oh, and also Jeff had just done a new Rorschach. That was his take on the whole thing. He had revived him and had found a character from the original series, the psychologist, this kid. And
yep.
And so to do that again when Jeff had just done it seemed wrong. So I was stuck between this sort of hard place where like both paths were wrong, either create him or not create him. And then I realized that this idea of the series being about someone who thinks he's Rorschach and whether he really is or not depends on how you look at him, and your opinion on whether he is or not tells you more about yourself than about him. I was like, hey, you know what that is? That's a Rorschach test, right? So like the idea of whether he is a Rorschach is a Rorschach. And once I remember walking my dog and just coming up with just like, oh, that's what it is. It's this idea of when you look at this guy, and he is someone who tried to assassinate the governor of California, who was candidate for president,
Turley. Yep.
Turley. Do you see him as Rorschach the hero, or do you see him as a crazy person in a mask? And that depends on who you are and where you are in the mystery. And so that's what our detective is. He's the one putting these clues together. So does he see this character as Rorschach the hero, which is what the kid sees him as, or does he see him as crazy man in a mask who tried to assassinate the governor, which is what the sort of governor in the world sees him as? And the whole mystery is, so like you said, our detective, like Columbo, has no backstory. There's literally zero. Like at one point, Jorge's like, should I give him a tattoo? I was like, no tattoo. You're going to know nothing about this guy. As far as you know, he was created on page 1. So the only thing you know about him is how he observes others. Just like the only thing you know about a Rorschach test is how you look at it. So it's all about looking and reflections and stuff. It comes from Virginia Woolf famously did this in fiction, where she said, like, there's 2 different ways to describe a character. Virginia Woolf said there's a character looking at another. There's a character looking at another character and saying, okay, you have red hair, you have this, you have that. These are your qualities. Yeah. And then she said, but that character, in describing the character, actually describes themselves, what they notice, what they see. And so when she's like, what this character is actually looking at, although they're describing someone else, they're actually describing a reflection of themselves. So it stems from that sort of Virginia Woolf concept of looking at character.
Very cool.
Also, it seemed cool.
Andy Conley, damn you, John, beat me to mentioning the obvious inclusion of Columbo and Rorschach. Tom, what did Frank Miller think of being included in the book? Yeah, we haven't talked about that. What did Frank think?
Frank and I had many discussions. He loved it. I was on the phone with Frank and Frank's people daily for months, getting them talking about this book and talking about his inclusion in the book. We talked about very, very early on, before I started writing. Before I had put pen to paper, I knew that I wanted to put Frank Miller book. For people who read the original Watchmen, Joe Orlando appears in the original Watchmen. He's in the back. He's been the back material, but he's sort of one of the artists of the Pirate comics.
Yes.
And also, although he's under a different name, Gil Kane is kidnapped and he's on the island and then gets killed in issue 11. It doesn't say it's Gil Kane, but it's very obviously him.
Is he Max whatever? Or
yeah, he's whatever. Yeah, it looks just like Gil Kane the way he's trying. And he's kind of like, Gil Kane was very much like, even though he was kind of he was a Jew from the ghetto, he dressed very waspy. And
yeah. Oh no, very country club. You're right.
Yeah, very country
and
club.
he would refer to people as dear boy.
Yeah, it was very much like that.
So Frank was cool with it, and
so Frank and I got on the phone. Frank was very cool. He said, all right, if you use me, I get to use you. So he agreed to use me. And I said he had to shave off 20 pounds. And he said, yes. So you see, when I'm in that book, I better be trim. I want a Frank Miller 6-pack.
Awesome.
So we exchanged that. I was very nervous sending him the material because sending Frank a book that's about Frank it's nerve-wracking. One, because number one, he's in it, and number two, it's my work, and Frank Miller is one of the gods of comics to me. And it's like God is reading my work. I feel like we said with the Mr. Miracle putting his hand in Jack Kirby's handprint, like it's just like it's not going to measure up. And number three, I give him a monologue, which is my monologue. It's my own monologue. I put it in Frank's mouth, where he espouses on sort of the limitations of doing dark comics. And that actually comes from conversations Frank and I have had over the years, because Frank is a big fan of fun comics. He grew up on Superman. He's from small town Vermont. And he loves big fun comics, but he's known as the guy who brought darkness to comics. And
grim and gritty.
Yeah, he sees that contradiction himself. And so I gave Frank this monologue that's about me and sort of the idea that, and I fuck knows I do dark comics, but like if you're someone who does that, if you're Alan Moore, if you're Frank Miller, if you're Tom King, and you do dark, have you added more to the world than someone like Carl Barks, who did bright, beautiful comics but said deep things?
Yes.
Or, like that can speak to children, that can make my kids smile. Someone like Dan DeCarlo.
That's so funny. I literally was going to say Dan DeCarlo as well. Go on.
Yeah, like people who embrace the cartooniness of it and just made brilliant that's a conflict that lives inside me of like, oh great, we deconstructed, we made things darker, we made things more realistic, but does that add more to reality than bright and beautiful and making a kid happy? So I gave that monologue, which is my own conflict on the issue, to Frank, and so I was scared because it was Frank condemning his own work, but Frank just thought it was hilarious. He just laughed it off. And we talked about it for a while. The most interesting part of the Frank conversation was, but you know this because you read the Otto Binder book.
Yes.
So in Otto Binder's book by Bill Shelley, there's a chap, Bill Shelley, who was a comic historian who died recently.
Great writer.
In doing his Otto Binder book, he unearthed this tape that was a tape of three or four guys visiting Otto Binder, who was if people don't know, Otto Binder was a huge Captain Marvel writer. He was one of the original science fiction authors, but like pre-Isaac Asimov. He came up with the first robot. That's who he is.
Right, Adam Link.
Yeah.
His story was called I, Robot. Asimov wrote a series of stories called I, Robot. The collection was called I, Robot. But even he said Otto was first with the concept of Adam Link and that original I, Robot story of a robot that's accused of murder and has to go on trial. That was all Otto Binder. Captain Marvel, big Superman writer, big Legion of Superheroes writer, big Supergirl writer. Yeah. Ironic that we're talking, obviously. And
he's the creator of Supergirl. He's the creator of Miss Marvel.
Yes, Mary Marvel. Yeah,
Mary Marvel, the creator of that little worm guy who's famous.
Mr. Mind.
Mr. Mind. And like if you've ever been like, why is there a character called Adam Strange? That makes that's Adam Link. It's a play on an old thing.
Yep. You got it.
So
and he was a big believer in white noise.
And he was And so in his older age, after he sort of kind of aged out of comics, which was sad, but still happens.
Yeah.
He became an expert on UFOs. He had his own magazine that was published, and tragically at that same time, his daughter, who was the love of his life, was I think 15 or 16. She got hit by a bus and passed away. And his daughter, who was the basis for both Ms. Marvel and Supergirl,
that's right,
died tragically and really crushed him personally for the rest of his life. He just sort of never recovered from that loss. And he became a believer in, like you said, white noise as part of this. He really believed in UFOs. He believed people were visiting us, and he believed. Well, you can read the comic book, but he believed that this sort of white noise theory, where if you run a magnetic tape, and no one makes any noise, that the electromagnetism in the air goes on the tape and it makes little scritches, and that's actually, you can interpret that as being either aliens or ghosts, or it's someone communicating with us in a way.
Yes.
And then if you play back the tape, you'll hear a sound, and you might hear within it a voice talking to you. So I'm really going on with this, but this is good. But
no, this is interesting, and especially given is one of the most creative minds to come from comics, and he had this belief.
Yes, and he had this belief, and he lived in rural Jersey, not rural Jersey, but in New Jersey, and a bunch of kids who were interested in history or interested in comics and love his comics went to visit him to like get signatures and do that kind of stuff. And it was fanzine kids, and there were four of them, and it was three fanzine guys, and they brought along Frank Miller, who was 16 at the time. And Frank sat down, and he's like, well, we're going to do a seance, Otto Binder says, and you're going to listen to the white noise. And they turned on the tape, and I can't tell you, I'm sure people know and they'll tell me, but Bill Shelley got a copy of the tape, and he puts the transcript in this book. And so you see you see Otto Binder say, I want to talk to my daughter from the beyond, just like tear your heart out kind of stuff.
Yeah. And
then each person goes on, and Frank says, I want to talk to my grandfather. And so when I was putting together this book of Rorschach, that story was in my head, and I knew about the Orlando piece, I knew about and the idea that you listen to a tape and you sort of hear what you want to hear from it. Like there's bubbles in it, and you're like, okay, did my daughter just say I love you? Right here, you know?
Right.
Like, again, that's a Rorschach test.
Absolutely. It's an audio Rorschach. No question. No question.
Rorschach. And so that connection that Frank Miller was present at this audio Rorschach that was actually about a man mourning his daughter, you know, that's just I mean, that was, I knew like that was going to live at the heart of my book. And
that's in issue 7 for people who aren't caught up on Rorschach and want to be, or another reason possibly to check out the book. The book is really playing on a lot of levels, and that's terrific because, again, it does also clue into this story is what you want to make of it. The detective is also doing the same thing. Everyone in the book is doing that, and it's Rashomon and Rorschach at the same time, points of view and leaving it open to the reader's interpretation and the characters' interpretations of what's going on. No, it's a great, honestly, man, you know, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. It's one of my favorite things that you've written. I absolutely. I think it plays on so many interesting levels. And it's funny because Comic Works with Jimmy is like, I'm an Alan Moore purist. I'm reluctant to read Rorschach. Nothing against you. I honestly think that Tom's, and this is me saying this, Tom's Rorschach book doesn't hurt anything about the original Watchmen story. It adds a different level. It's almost in a much better execution, kind of the idea, I think, that what Gotham, the television series, was trying to promote in the Joker characterization, and that could the Joker inspire future or the maniacal characters in Gotham. The question was it the Joker, or are these people that, like the Joker, found inspiration from? And also in the Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, I think you see that kind of movement behind the Joker's actions and stuff. And I personally would put it in that category of Rush. You know, Walter Kovacs has his story. This is not about Walter Kovacs. This is about people that, you know, again, might have been inspired by Walter, again, based on your interpretation. So I like it.
Yeah, that's well, Frank and I, just to finish with Frank, so I talked to Frank and I was like, do you remember this tape? And he had not thought about that in 50 years.
Sure.
And so to get him on the phone where he's like, oh, I remember that trip to Otto's house. And I remember, you know, so that was the big revelation for Frank. Was amazing conversation. Him just be like, oh my God, yeah, when I was a kid, I can't believe that tape exists. Someone like, anyways, so yeah. But yeah, as that person comes, I love Alan Moore as well. I totally understand it if I'm not, I don't put any fault on you in that. Please know that I did go to Dave Gibbons and Dave is okay with it. And please know this is what I said to myself, and you don't have to accept any of these things. It's just what I said to myself, because I was reluctant to do it too. Number one, there's nothing. If this book wasn't published, Alan was still not going to get his rights back. There's nothing I could do to get him his rights back. Whatever I did, he wasn't going to get them. If this book is published, though, more people buy Watchmen, and Dave Gibbons gets more money, and Alan Moore gets more. So they're free to completely ignore all the bullshit I wrote. Number two, I just like John said, I did not. That work is sacred to me, and I did not mess with it. It's sacred. I didn't retcon anything. No. I didn't use the characters. You could read every single thing that happens that involves anything with Dr. Manhattan or anything in that book as inside somebody's mind in this thing. You could erase this entire,
sure.
But or you can look at it as in continuity with this and with the TV show.
Yes.
Number three, Alan is a great guy. He's wonderful. He uses a lot of other people's characters in his work.
Yes, he does.
Lost
Girls,
Lost Girls,
and of course, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The actual Watchmen characters we all know are actually this book, which has a character that's based on Steve Ditko. They're actually they come from an origin of Steve Ditko's characters.
Yeah, the Charlton heroes. Yeah,
the Charlton heroes. So. And number four, I have the same contract Alan has. I have it with Sheriff of Babylon. Boy, I freaking hate the fact that I can't get the rights back to that. So I'm someone who can feel his pain and sort of, I don't know. That's what I say. You can have your own objections, and it makes sense to me too.
Sure, and Jimmy's right. Promethea, based on the Crucible, and Gore Vidal makes a good point. Always glad to see Gore Vidal. Rorschach is a moving book. We know the destiny of the characters in the first issue, and each subsequent issue reveals who they were, and we feel for them. Absolutely, man. Very well put.
Stolen from Citizen Kane. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Zach, what do you got here, Zach? Doing stories like Mr. Miracle or Strange Adventures and boosting their profiles, is there intent to jumpstart these characters for more projects by other creators when you're done?
Is there? I mean, I want people. I don't know. I mean, it's an excellent question, because I write these stories that have endings, and I never think, okay, now somebody's going to pick them up and run with them. That said, when they announced Vision 2 and they were going to do like a hype, I was like, that's going to be awesome. I hope Chelsea Kane was doing it, and I had no objection to that. And I was like, yeah, run with it. My story will stand as my story. I don't really object to someone sort of taking that world and running with it. No, I mean, my goal is to raise. I mean, it's different for different. I should say it's different. Like a book like Supergirl, which just came out.
Yes,
that is a launching point for Supergirl. Like she's. Oh, sorry, spoiler. She doesn't end up in a ditch dead at the end, but she like the point of that book is to make her so awesome that you really want another Supergirl series. Whether I'm going to write it or somebody else is, that's someone else's decision. But like that's a book that's a launching point for Supergirl. I would think Heroes in Crisis would be a great launching point for characters like Booster Gold, who I loved writing and should have just spun out of that book, because he's a superstar. He's the most fun character to write in comics. Mr. Miracle and Strange Adventures, those are different because those are kind of like novels that have endings. And so, I mean, like, I think maybe Mr. Terrific could probably pop out of that book. I think we found more angles with him. But I don't know about Adam Strange. I don't know. It's a good question.
I understand. Jimmy has a question about Superman. I loved your Superman book, but I do have a question. Do you think the burning of Lois in The Head of Superman was a bit too far? It was kind of grim.
The burning of, you mean issue? The 1,000 Deaths of Lois Lane. No, I don't. I've read that. Because at the time it came out, there was someone objected on Twitter, and so I went back and I looked at it panel by panel. It was drawn by Andy. Like, again, my descriptions are very low. Andy Kubert's been in comics for 35 years. His father is one of the founding fathers of the industry. I trust him to know where the line is to draw that kind of stuff, and so I'm going to err on the side of Andy being right. And that issue is very personal to me, because that issue is about those moments when you're away from your loved ones, whether it be your children, you could be away at war like I was with my wife back home, or you could just be, like one time one of my kids went missing for 2 hours and we couldn't find it, where your brain goes off and you're not imagining, oh, I bet my kid's in some field of flowers somewhere playing. You're imagining their worst hell in your mind. And especially people who are very far away from their relative, you have that hell inside your head, and you're imagining the absolute worst things, but you still have to get on the phone and be like, honey, I trust you. Everything's going to be fine. I love you. Like that war is inside you, and I wanted to present that war. And so, no, I don't regret. I think I wanted to show the desperation in Superman's body. He is seeing the worst things in his head. That's what he thinks of. That's how he spends his entire life. He spent 80 years saving Lois Lane from things. So for him to go away and think, what the hell happens when I'm gone? That's tough on Superman. I wanted to show that he could go through that and have that pain and still be like, okay, but I'm still going to save Alice. I'm going to trust Lois Lane because I know she's awesome and can protect herself, and I'm going to keep saving Alice. So it was the goal of the thing was to show how awesome and how awesome we all are that we can have those thoughts and keep going.
I understand, man. I'll tell you, I don't know if you're watching the TV show Superman and Lois.
I'm not. I generally.
Don't
you have on. I was listening to your conversation with Slot, and which was amazing. I love
Slott.
Yeah, it was 3 hours of
like you, we talk as much off the air as we do on the air. But go on.
Yeah, you guys. But like, I think the world is very divided today, and most people think it's Democrats and Republicans. But no, it's divided between you fuckers who have no kids and us fuckers who do have kids.
I understand
That's
that
the
too.
real division of the world right now. Like,
it is a good family show, and I don't know how much you want to. And we probably have talked about it before. Are the kids reading comics? Do they like comics? Your kids?
Yes, my kids are super into comics. My older one is into superhero comics.
Okay.
He'll read anything. He loves past stuff. His favorite age is the Dark Age. He tells me all the time. He loves like late 80s, early 90s.
Funny.
Yeah, he loves DeMatteis's Justice League.
Wow.
He loves John Byrne's Superman.
Okay.
He's super into that era. He just read Invincible for the first time, and he just swept through it. He loves events. He just read Secret War. He thinks Secret War is like the best event of all time. He's like, yeah, it's better than Infinity Gauntlet. I was like, well, Secret War, really? I don't know. So he reads everything. We're going to Third Eye Comics this weekend.
Great.
To buy him some comics. Because he had a little bit of a sniffly nose, so I didn't take him to the signing because I didn't think it was. So yeah, and my youngest two will read comics. They're super into Archie. My house is all Archie.
Awesome.
I have, every time we go to a bookstore, I buy 4 of those little volumes. All 3 of my children read them. So yeah, they're they can tell you every corner of Riverdale and what Chuck's best friend is and all that. They know the Archie deep cuts and the eras. My daughter reads all the young adults, which are so great now. The graphic novels, all those. And my littlest guy, who's 7, reads a lot of comic strips, like Zits and that kind of thing. So yeah, all of them are into comics. Okay,
because I just think honestly the portrayal of Superman and Lois as parents, I'm in. I really think the characters retain their voices. They are facing different problems as parents, but are still. Lois is on the trail of a very interesting investigative reporting story. Superman, they still have plenty of time for Superman to do super things and is fighting villains that can punch back and are truly an equal match for him, both on an intellectual level and on a strength level. And I mean, it shouldn't surprise me because I know Jeff Johns is in the mix. Who knows, this stuff better than Jeff as far as current writers go. And I'm just really, really impressed with the level of characterization in those and the ability to maintain the core of what the characters are, even though now they're parents. And the kids are interesting. The sons are interesting. So I'm very, very impressed with it. But it really makes me think about these 2 great characters in ways that only happen when they're in the right hands. I think you're like that. I think Rucka is like that. I think Wade is like that. Certainly Johns. I like what Brian did with the characters as well during his run. It is. I find it very interesting. So let's see here. What
Rucka just got a nomination for a great short story in that Detective Comics. Was it 1027? Yeah, I think
probably 1027. Yeah.
Well, I also had a story on it, but it wasn't as good as Rucka's. But yeah, if you're voting for the Eisners, go out and vote for that story. I think it's brilliant.
Oh no, Greg's amazing. It's so funny. We've been trying just to hang out, talk for like the last 2 months, and it's like, and literally it'd be like, "Can you talk tonight?" I'm really sorry, I can't. He's sending his daughter off to school. Just again, family shit, just like you're dealing with and stuff. So
he's a big Hollywood guy now. He's got like 30.
There's that as well. Oh, it's funny. I agree with Zach. Tyler Hecklin won me over in a huge way. He's quickly become a favorite for me. I agree. Mark and I were talking, and Mark's like, when I first saw him on Supergirl, I thought he was too small because he really is. He's literally about the same size as Supergirl is in the show, but his character is so great. He really gets Clark Kent. And I think plays a very strong Clark Kent, which obviously, that's much like Batman is really the person, even though Bruce Wayne is the facade. Clark is the real person in the Superman identity, and it's just this is Clark Kent. This is Lois Lane. I'm very, very impressed.
All right, I can. Well, fine. I'll watch the show.
No. And that's good. Greg's like Eduardo Riso killed that Ruckus story. Man, I love Eduardo Riso. What a gentle man. I mean, just a very sweet guy and a brilliant artist. And the few times that I've gotten to talk to him, both on the air and off, it's always a pleasure. He's amazing. And Azzarello looks at me like, you idiot, because that's how Azzarello always looks at me, which I don't mind. It's all right.
I cannot tell you how many times Riso has kindly declined to work with me. I'm sure it must be in the dozens by now. I met him so long ago. I think when Sheriff was coming out. What a nice man. I'd love to work with him, but he has wonderful partners he's working with.
Right, or doing his own comics. So no, I get that. Different minds or different X minds. Hi Tom, are you a fan of Wildstorm? Any chance DC is working on bringing back some Wildstorm properties? Would you want to do any Wildstorm properties?
So my particular nerd as a kid was so fucking mainstream that I did not go off to Image. I was talking to Josh Williamson about this. Like, I was so, like, when people went to Image, I just stayed on Avengers and I stayed on Superman. I didn't follow Wildcats and go that direction. I did when I came back into when Alan Moore did his ABC comics.
Yes.
I read all of those. And they're some of the best comics of ever.
Oh God, yeah.
But does DC have plans for Wildstorm? I think DC, there are no limits now. Once this Omniverse got in place, I think they're just waiting for the right pitches with the right characters. I mean, if you went in with a brilliant Wildstorm pitch right now, I think they'd be all in on it.
Well,
Grifter's
in that one Batman book.
Yeah,
they've got a Grifter feature.
Yeah, so I think there's no hesitation. I mean, obviously our publisher is Jim Lee, so there's a man on the inside.
Yeah, Mikey wants to know. Now we can't get specifics, Mikey, but yes, Tom is doing 5 conventions this year to be announced. So we'll leave it at that. Let's see here. What else have we got? Sorry, because there continue to be questions, but I'm here. Marcelo Ramos, did DC give up on releasing your Batman run in Deluxe Edition? I think it's only one more to go, completing the run.
I know, right? I have no idea. I've asked them. I have not gotten an answer. I hope they put out the last Deluxe Edition. I want it on my shelf. I want people to read it. I want to sign it. I want everyone to have it. And I don't know if they've given up. I've asked, and they sort of I get different answers. The editors who control the softcover books are not the same editors who control the hardcover books, and it's it's a complicated bureaucry at DC, as anyone can tell you. So I'm sure the people who I've asked are trying really hard, and I wish I knew the answer, and Lord knows I'm on your side.
Jimmy wants to know any plans to do anything with Swamp Thing after Rom V, because your winter special story felt like a great tribute to Len Wein. I would agree.
It was literally a tribute to Len Wein. The first time I wrote Swamp Thing in Batman, my brain being so old, that began as a Len Wein tribute, because Len actually, that was one of the last scripts we worked on a little bit.
Wow.
Because he was going to launch a new Swamp Thing book, out of Batman. So we had made that's why Mitch and I did Batman 23, which is a Swamp Thing issue.
Yes, I love that issue. That's a great issue.
It was supposed to be a launch pad for to Len to come in and do some stuff, maybe a backup story that would lead to his sort of launch. And because of his health issues at the end of his life, he wasn't able to do that. And so then the winter special obviously evolved from sort of after his passing. I know I have no plans for Swamp Thing. Not that I would I think Ram V is killing it, and he brings an incredible intelligence and a different perspective to the character.
Agreed.
And I don't possess either of those things. So my perspective on Swamp Thing is that Alan Moore did it perfectly, and I'm just kind of doing. If I was to write it, it would be more like Alan Moore cover songs. And don't get me wrong, man. When I was a kid, I'd go to Beatles cover bands where they dress up and do the Beatles. But,
oh yeah.
I don't think people want to pay full price to see it. So
Well, no, you're right about that. I really do think Alec Holland has been explored top to bottom, and that is why what Rom and Mike Perkins are doing is so interesting to find a new avatar of the Green to explore. And I think it really, really works. And like you say too, just it's so and Rom, because of his background, brings a different perspective. But I do find that Europeans, and in the case of Rom, Asians are able to take American comics or comic tropes and present them in a very different way. And yeah, Rom is really one of these new voices, new to me, that not only his mainstream or his DC stuff, but God, his creator-owned stuff is just incredible. And no, I really, man, there's a guy that I've only been talking to for slightly over a year, about 15, really since COVID, I suppose, that I really, every time I look forward to every conversation. And man, Savage Shores was so good, so smart, creator-owned thing that he did. So yeah. John H. has, go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
No, he's just, yeah. I will endorse, just while I have the Swamp Thing. There was a Swamp Thing special that came out that Ron was launching from. There was like Swamp Things throughout the ages, and my buddy Julian Lytle did a story in it about those lost Japanese soldiers encountering Swamp, and it's one of the best short stories I read all year. So if anyone wants just a pure Swamp Thing story that I love, that's one of them.
That's cool.
Twist short story.
Very nice. John H. has a stock question, but I'm happy to have you answer it. He's from Brazil. It's a naive question, as he
Beatles
said.
or the Stones. Beatles.
But how does one start writing or drawing for DC or Marvel? Is there a way to talk to them, or should I just make myself known first? Lots of love from Brazil.
I mean, drawing is different than writing. So it's if you can draw well, they'll hire you. Like there's a certain level. If you can draw and tell a story, you'll get hired, because it's easy to see good art. You just got to get your art in front of them in some sort of way. And there are 1,000 ways to do that. But I can tell you that the guys I know who review portfolios, who go to cons and review portfolios, if they find a diamond in the rough, they're over the moon. They're like, I found a guy, I'm going to call him like that. And Clay Mann, who I work with, who I think is the best artist in comics, got his big break from. He should tell the story because I can't tell it the way he would tell it. But he literally sat down. Joe Q was supposed to do an art portfolio and got delayed or something, and he sat there for 9 hours next to the table until Joe showed up at the end of the day so he could show his portfolio. He just literally sat down next to the table, cross-legged. So drawing's different. Writing is tough to get into DC and Marvel. I was listening to what Mark was saying about like doing web comics. I think that's what the answer we all give these days is make your own content and get noticed that way. I have to say, like, just in terms of practicality, and I can be corrected on this, I don't know too many guys who were like, man, your web comic was great. Let me hire you now for Marvel or DC. I don't know too many guys who got in that way, or too many women. I use guys because I'm from LA. Guys meaning
right. Yeah, people.
Well, so it seems to be the way to break in is to become successful as a writer in some other. Seems to be like they're hiring a lot of guys who wrote for TV, who wrote for animation. They're hiring a lot of guys who obviously, if you did a big book of Boom or Image, that the guys who have a little lower threshold, that seems to be more the way in than just pure webcomics. Although your webcomic could lead to your Boom book that then leads to your.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because I have friends that started with their webcomics, got hired by the smaller publishers, then found their opportunities at bigger publishers. And John, I would say to you, make your own stuff, because you have to prove that you can do storytelling, whether you are drawing your own stuff or writing your own stuff. And from an art standpoint, it's not just that you can storytell. Can you storytell with a deadline? So I do think if you are able to show a web comic that comes out consistently weekly or whatever, but at least within some sort of 30-day span, no more than that, you're showing an ability to make deadlines and do it. Because a lot of people in the last couple of years, with the idea of inclusion, have been hired by the big two, and unfortunately, the artist was not able to maintain a monthly schedule. That's a problem. These are monthly books. So, and the only reason why I'm getting a little pointed with my answer is it isn't just that you can draw pretty pictures. Can you storytell? And can you storytell with a deadline in mind? And I would suggest that you do build up your own library of stories on your own. They could, if they're superhero stories, that's fine. I've said this directly to people who've emailed me and said, "How do I break in? I really want to write Superman." Okay, great. Well, Superman is enough of an idea that you can write your own version of Superman and do whatever you want with it. You don't have to worry about continuity or anything. Tell your story. Don't wait for the opportunity. And the likelihood is, I think Tom's being kind saying, and he's probably right in terms of from art, that yes, a talented booker might find a diamond in the rough and give someone an opportunity. That's kind of unlikely, though. And I would say instead, like, well, really, I mean, I'll be honest. It's like, make your own books. Don't wait. Don't wait for DC or Marvel. Make your own stories. Build up a volume, and then you can hand somebody, whether it's a webcomic and you go to Kinko's and print out all the pages, here's my book or whatever, when it's time to do that. But you have to have something in hand. You can't just walk in the door and I'm here. I'm ready to write or I'm ready to write Batman. I'm ready to write Captain Marvel, whatever. Ain't going to happen. Sorry. There's only... And again, you'll forgive the sharpness in my voice. There are literally, I'm throwing it out an arbitrary number. Let's say there are 160 jobs at DC and Marvel writing or drawing comics. That's pretty small. It's like the NBA. You can't just show up at the court and go, "Yeah, I can make 3-pointers. I'm here."
Oh, I just got scared, John, all of a sudden.
Well, honestly, and truly, John, I appreciate it. And you're even saying maybe it's a naive question, but that's why you need a dose of reality of, hey, make your own comics. Don't wait to jump in at DC or Marvel firsthand. Ain't going to happen. 99% of it, probably not going to happen. As much as diamonds in the rough are discovered, again, Clayman might be an exception. That's a rare exception. So there you go.
Well, I mean, I've worked with two artists who had very little experience. One is Jorge, who I love. Who I think is just a genius.
Beautiful art.
He was known in the community because he would just tweet out these beautiful Batman splashes that look just like David Mazzucchelli, and we'd all sort of get notes about him. Be like, "Have you seen this guy, Jorge? He's on like," and literally like, yeah, that's how I got to know him. Was he was tweeting out beautiful but then he was also doing an Aftershock book, so we knew he could do paneled pages, and then. Right. We had an emergency and we needed a guy, and I was like, this guy is brilliant, and that's how so yes, it went from Twitter to me checking to see if he could make a deadline, just like you said, and then now he's on Batman. Like that's and now
again but Aftershock was part of that equation.
And Aftershock was part of that equation, exactly.
So I mean that's why I'm glad you mentioned the opportunity of going from webcomics to a Boom or an Aftershock or somebody like that. Yeah, but again, a track record is established before I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille. I'm ready to draw Batman for you or Superman or whatever. And it's like, there's just a likelihood that it ain't going to happen. Literally, I've been working with those guys from Talent Talk, and they will do private sessions with people like Mark Waid and Howard Chaykin. And there was a guy who's like, "Oh, I got my graphic novel. It's all ready and whatever." And I'm ready to go to the next level. And it's like, yeah, that's for an editor to decide. Get your book out there in the meantime. And because at the very least, you've accomplished something. If you don't make it to DC and Marvel, you might make it on your own. There are great webcomic and creator-owned comic creators that after their success making their own stuff have been offered jobs at DC and Marvel. And it's like, that's great. I'm kind of doing okay on my own. Thanks anyway. One of my good friends in Chicago, Ryan Brown. I love that guy. Smart guy. God hates astronauts. He made his comic a webcomic. He built an audience on his own. He kickstarted and crowdfunded all of his stuff. Image is like, we want to publish God Hates Astronauts. He did 12 issues. It was less satisfying than doing it on his own, and he made less money than he was crowdfunding. And he's like, "Eric Stevenson, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going back to doing my creator-owned and crowdfunding. And you know, and he's, you know, I mean, he still will get like the occasional, like he was doing Quantum and Woody recently. So yeah, again, everybody, I apologize. And John, I don't mean to pick on you because it is a fair question. It's just, it is a naive question because it really is kind of like, all right, I'm here. Where's the banquet? I want to sit down. It's like, sorry, man. You got to prove yourself before you get to sit at the table.
I will say I had the same question myself.
Sure you did.
A decade ago, and where I started was listening to John listening to it's just 100. I told the story about 100% true. I listen to John and I listen to people, idiots like me, tell their origin stories, and that's I literally followed the ladder. I followed Brad Meltzer's ladder, but you know, find someone's story that you think it seems possible to you. That seemed possible to me to write a novel and get it published and then get into comics. So just listen to an origin story where it makes sense, and then do that.
Right.
And just you gotta work so hard. Just work hard. If you work hard and you're good at it, you'll get there.
Oh, I love this question by Brian. Heroes in Crisis was beautiful. Any details on the process of having Narc? I love Narc. Recite Keats' Bright Star. I love that scene. Yeah, I'm a big Narc fan. What a great idea of a caveman that evolves, basically.
God, I love that. That's one of my favorite scenes, and him sitting back there. And you know, it was funny. It was controversial at the time because my editor was a huge Teen Titans fan and was telling me Narc doesn't speak in caveman language because I have Marco, you know, like just general kind of Tarzanish kind of speak, me Narc.
Sure.
And in traditional, he appeared like three Teen Titans issues in 50 years ago.
Yeah,
like,
literally. Yeah.
Nick Cardy,
yes,
Bob Haney issues.
So good.
And but I was like, okay, nobody's going to notice because I want him to speak in caveman language, but be incredibly intelligent. I'm probably too much caveman lawyer when I was a kid from Saturday Night Live. I may be only a caveman lawyer, but
I'm a caveman. No, you got to do it much more country club caveman.
Yeah,
your technology frightens me. You know, yeah,
a little Shatner in there.
Phil Hartman, man, the best.
But I love the idea that he was just an incredibly intelligent, insightful human who understood, you know, who was studied and learned, and just happened to talk in caveman language, Tarzan language. I liked the contrast with that because the idea that it's that idea that we look at someone, it just made the character immediately interesting. That everyone is going to assume he's an idiot because he. You know, it's the old don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, simple as that. It's like, okay, his name is Narc. He talks in a caveman. He's got no shirt on. He's going to be the dumbest guy in the room. And no, he's in there reciting Keats. He has probably one of the most essential scenes in the book where he sort of talks about the philosophy of life and debates, you know, Plato versus Aristotle and all of these things. I mean, that's the best part about comics is we take the absurdity of these child ideas and we mix it with, you know, the deep questions in our heart, and it comes magic. Like that's what I love most about the medium.
I'm with you, man. Absolutely. Let's see here. That's nice. Zach's like, can I tease some guests that are coming up on Word Balloon? And who would Tom like to hear John interview for your upcoming Word Balloon episodes? Well, I'll tell you, honestly, I have a lot of people that we've at least in principle talked about, hey, you're coming up, but I haven't set hard dates. I will say that I'm taking tomorrow off. Shelley Bond and I are going to talk on Sunday afternoon. I love Shelley. She's great.
Love your talk to Shelley.
And she's
like your brother and a sister.
Honestly, she feels like my sister. And I always tell her, like, because we had similar college backgrounds as well. And it's like, we so would have been friends in school if we had known each other. So I really feel like we've just discovered each other. And I love Philip too. It's not a crush, everybody. I promise you. Although Shelley is an adorable woman, but I really do respect her as a friend. And I'm really excited about her Kickstarter. So I'm really happy to help. And she's doing this great one about editing comics and a guide to editing comics. And I think in this creator-owned world, as much as you want to write your story, you should kind of either look for a great editor or know what to look for from an editing standpoint. So she's going to be on with her artists that are helping her with this editing book. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk to Peter Milligan. Monday, it's definitely in stone. I'm talking to Paul Kupperberg. And Paul...
Oh, I love your Paul Kupperberg conversation.
I love talking to him. And thank God Paul is the pack rat that he is and keeps everything. Because years ago, for an internal DC publication for everybody that was in the company, he would interview a lot of these great artists, writers, and editors, from Denny O'Neil to Joe Orlando to Ramona Fraden, and he has collected the raw interviews because they were only going to be, a page or 2 pages in a DC internal magazine. He's got the full length, so they're several pages long, and he's collected them in a book, and it's great because it's essentially what I keep saying I'll eventually do with my word balloon conversation.
Slacker.
I know, big slacker. I talk a good game, but I literally talk a good game. But yeah, I can't seem to put it down on paper. But that said, so we're going to talk about that. And he wrote a JSA novel called I believe was called Ragnarok, and it's about the modern JSA. It's kind of the Dale Eaglesham, Jeff Johns era of the early 2000s JSA, because Mr. Terrific is in there, and a lot of the modern characters are in there along with the classic characters. So we're going to talk about both of those things in particular, but of course, take any questions that everybody has. And then on Wednesday, I'm already set, and I'll be doing a boxing conversation because I can't help it. Our good friend Mike Cronenberg and the guys from Ringside Seat are going to be there because boxing, listen, I don't give a shit about Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather. They can both go fuck themselves. I am not going to spend $50 to watch them play boxing. And everyone who bought that thing is like, oh, it really wasn't that good. I was Ralph Nader the whole time saying, do not waste your money on this crap. That said, there have been some exceptional fights going on. There's going to be another one tomorrow night on ESPN, a great bantamweight fight. And I can't believe how great boxing has been in the shadow, literally, because, of course, Logan Paul and Floyd Mayweather got all the headlines. But that's bullshit. I like real boxing. And they've announced, in about a month, Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder are going to be fighting each other. Lots of great fights have been happening and are about to happen this summer. So I'm very happy to talk to the Ringside Seat guys and have an evening talking about boxing. Beyond that, I've got nothing set in stone, so it's not worth mentioning people that are coming up. So I don't know who you want me to talk to that I haven't talked to yet. Tom.
I mean, I would just say the old guys.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk to Joe Giella. I got to set that up for you. He's 95. He has all the stories. He was Bob Crane's ghost. Got Bob Kane's ghost and stuff. He wasn't Bob Crane's ghost.
No, not Hogan's Heroes. No, Bob Kane. Yeah, Bob Kane's ghost artist. Yeah.
I mean, there's guys like you don't hear from who are around that I just want to hear their voices. Like Larry Lieber's around.
I get the feeling without ever actually trying to get him personally. The people that know Larry tell me he's a very private man. I know Andrew Reisman interviewed him for his Stan Lee book, but this is what I'm hearing from the people that are close to Larry, that it's like, leave Larry alone. And I'm like, that's cool. I remember there was a book that came out in the early 2000s that promoted women comic creators, and they really, really, really wanted Marie Severin, while she was still alive, to be part of the book. And literally her family had to tell this person, look, she's not well. We really appreciate the enthusiasm, but back off. It's like, leave her alone. So I am going to talk in principle. I just talked to Ron Friends because Roger Stern and Sal Buscema are doing this new book called Heroes Union. It's fantastic.
I was about to say Sal Buscema on my list.
And I won't be
Friends
talking
would also
to them.
be very interesting.
I won't be talking to them live, unfortunately, because Roger is a Luddite and can't figure out a lot of basic computer stuff, which is okay with me. And it was funny because
Stern was my favorite writer.
He's the best. He's the best.
His Avengers run is so perfect.
Everything, his Superman run, his Spider-Man run, everything he did, he was incredible, and still is a hell of a writer. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to him. And the PR person was very sweet about it. And she's just like, they're not really good if they, you can't explain StreamYard to them. They can't figure out Zoom. I'm like, I'll talk to them on the phone. It's fine. I just want to talk to them. And the same goes with Sal. So that's the great news. So I can't give you a hard date.
I want to that.
Yeah, it's going to be great. That's funny. And Zach says, anytime I get Walt Simonson, it's a treat. Oh, yeah. I want to talk more with Louise as well. But Walter is terrific to me, and very available. I just don't want to abuse it. We did a couple drink and draws for the Hero Initiative, where we had a bunch of artists in a group, but really it was just all of us sitting around listening to Walt tell stories. That was fantastic, and I feel that way about Louise as well. She's so brilliant, and I really will never get her due, but is so accomplished and has incredible stories. We mentioned the Otto Binder book, that other book that Bill Shelley wrote about Jim Warren and Warren Publishing, creepy, eerie, and everything. Louise was an editor for him.
Yeah.
And really Louise has done everything you can do as a writer and editor in comics. So she has a million stories that we haven't gotten to yet. So I'll be bugging Louise. But yeah, I had them on a few months ago. So I also am like, give them a break. They don't need to hear from me like Tom hears from me every month saying, hey, let's do another one. So
I always have a new book coming out.
Well, that's good. Well, and also, God, you did me that solid last month, interviewing me for the 16th anniversary. That was great. And so many nice people were really enjoyed it. And that's great. Because again, it's like, who gives a shit about me? It's like, you guys, I'm here to ask the questions.
I give a shit about you, John.
That's cool. I appreciate that. Magic Case says he wants to know if you have any other Superman projects in the future. He loved Up in the Sky. Obviously, you're doing Supergirl right now, and it's a great series. I just wrote a little Clark Kent thing and something, but it wasn't like a full Superman thing. Was it one of those red and blues? Oh, I have a red and blue. That's true. I do. I have a red and blue coming up. I don't know if that's been announced, but yes, I can't tell you the artist is. It'll blow your mind. I just got the art in today, and it's crazy good. So yeah, I do have a little short story, Superman. I love writing Superman. I would write him till the day I die. I just cannot stop writing this character. I'm trying. There's an artist I love. I've been trying to talk him into a big Superman project for a year now, and I can't get him to say yes. So maybe he's probably, if he's listening now, he knows who he is, and damn it, say yes. So yeah, no. I mean, Supergirl has those same qualities. It's a very different character, and so I love playing in the super world. I hope I get to keep doing it. Gore Vidal's list, Dave Sim. Yeah, I would agree. I would love to talk to Berto or Jaime, the Hernandez brothers. Sergio Aragonis, I agree. Sal's coming up. George Perez kind of retired. I unfortunately had my leg infection when I probably had my biggest opportunity to talk to him, moderating a panel with him and Marv at C2E2, but I had to miss that one because I was recuperating in the hospital. Matt Wagner, guys, I have talked to recently in the last couple months. Look on the archive, you'll find it. Mike Grell, I've talked to recently, is in the archive. Look at the back track, and you'll find it. So yeah, so and again, I don't expect everyone to know every episode and what's going on, especially with the volume that I put stuff out. I mean, this is my 5th interview this week, or 6th interview. I can't remember, frankly. I have some more Bendis tapes. Brian and I have been trying to connect for like the last 2 months, and he's like, hang on, I know. So I'm like, all right, it'll come. I mean, again, Brian is like you. I would talk to Brian every week or every month if it were possible. He's got a house full of kids, and Olivia his oldest is getting ready for college. I was bummed. It was like this close that she was going to go to school in Chicago, and I'm like, that's great. I'll see you. This will be fantastic. And he's like, yeah, she got it. I forget where she's going, what city she's going instead. I'm like, all right, no problem. So. But yeah, no, I love Brian, and yeah, we literally we talk back and forth. He was laughing at my Howard Chaykin conversation from this week because we spent most of the time talking about Broadway than we were about comics at all. And I love that. Whatever Howard wants to talk about, I'm like, go, Howard. This is what we're talking about. One of your Howard Chaykin comments was revelatory to me because you guys talked about all these old detective novels, and I was like, man, I got to start reading old detective novels if I'm going to be a good writer. So yeah, I love when you guys go off on tangents like that. Brubaker's like that too. I mean, I love talking about old detective novels with him. So Pumpkin Time, Dan Jurgens or Maxwell Prince? I don't know Maxwell Prince, I'll be honest. Who's Maxwell Prince? I have no idea, but what does Pumpkin Time mean? I'm not sure. But if you're asking about me talking to Dan Jurgens, we did a lot during COVID. It's funny because Greg I thought I get it, sorry. Well, I was just going to say that much like Dan Jurgens, Greg Rucka and Jurgens have been on a lot during COVID in conversation with me on online conventions and also just doing my show in general. And I'm always happy to talk to Dan. Dan's always been one of my favorite writers in comics. He's only a few years older than me. It blows my mind that a guy that I was reading in the 80s is a kind of a friend and always like, oh yeah, John, whatever you want to do. But it also, I'm like, I don't want to like go to the well too many times. So it's like, all right, Dan will be back. Dan will be back on the show. So, and Raphael keeps asking, and sorry, Raphael, it's just we covered this already. No Bat Cat released in September. Does the title have a bi-monthly release now? The answer is yes.
Yes.
And most of apparently, Tom's books. What isn't bi-monthly right now, Tom? Supergirl
and Rorschach are monthly. Go. So it's half and half. Supergirl, Rorschach monthly, Strange Adventures, and Batcat are bi-monthly.
Oh, this is interesting. I didn't know. Thank you very much, Different X Minds. Max Prince does Ice Cream Man and Haha at Image.
There you go. I've heard many things about Ice Cream Man. I got to check it out.
I will investigate. Yeah, okay. And obviously also Gore Vidal adds to his stories as well. I guess unconventional horror stories in the tradition of the Twilight Zone and Black Mirror, and updated beautiful stories for ugly children. All right, good to know. Fantastic. This is interesting. RBM Kingston. I'd love a co-written book with Tom Taylor and Tom King. That needs to happen. Is it getting tiresome with the mix-ups, or is it just funny?
It's not tiresome in the least. It is just funny. That is, Tom and I get along famously. We're very similar. We're very different too. I mean, he was a professional juggler for 10 years, and I was in the CIA for 10 years. But like, just those two things almost put us parallel. That we both had crazy jobs that nobody believes anyone would ever have.
I had no idea he was a juggler. That's got to come up in my next conversation with him. I love Tom too.
Oh yeah, he was a guy, going on the street, put a cat on the floor,
sure, and
start going, and people, it was his gig. He did at conventions. Tom will do like tricks on stage if you ask him to. He's a guy who wears a hat a lot because he's probably hiding his, and he has children just like I do. We kind of our children are parallel. He just happens to live on the other side of the world,
right?
And I'm probably a little more scared of spiders than he is. So it doesn't bother me at all. I love his comics. I love his grit. I like how he writes for all the different companies. I like his animated shows. I find it entirely flattering when people confuse the two of us. And I also I'm a guy who wrote Nightwing. Who did Grayson, and I know that can be such a trap of a book because it can be Batman light. And to see Tom take it and just make it clean and pretty and perfect and work so that people are excited, that I hate. I don't like him at all for that. 'Cause, that really pisses me off that he could do that because it's very, very hard. And I feel like I could not do that as well as he did. So fuck Tom Taylor is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, there you go. No, I love Tom too. Tom, it's that group of Aussies, and Nicholas Scott is part of this, that I love. I would love going to San Diego because I would always take an early flight Monday morning, and all the Aussies, because their body clocks are different than ours, when it's Sunday night in front of the Hyatt and everyone's gone to bed, the Aussies are still out there at 2 a.m. hanging out and talking. And so invariably, that's how I really got to know Tom over the years, way, way back when he was still doing Star Wars comics and stuff. And Nicola first introduced me to Tom. And he's the best. And I love Nicola. She's adorable. And, Greg is the one who kind of brokered that friendship with Nicola. Nicola, much like you, Tom, was also an early Word Balloon listener. And it was just like, why are you wasting, both of you? It's like, what are you doing? Like do other things. Don't listen to my crap. It's like it was very flattering that people like yourself and Nicola were listening. So that was nice.
They're the most. If you can go drinky with Tom and Nicola, you're having a good time.
Absolutely,
that is awesome.
And I'll even confess I haven't seen Mank yet on Netflix. Have you seen Mank yet? And if so, what do you think?
Have I not ranted about not liking Mank on this?
I guess
I rarely offer pop culture opinions, but I will offer one on this. I do not like that movie.
Interesting.
For many reasons. Number one, if you know Mankiewicz, the movie has nothing to do with him. Like he is I say this as a Jewish person. He's a Jew from New York who was part of the Algonquin table, but was like always in debt and Gaelics. Like some of that's there. This was the most British presentation. He's like drinking tea, his accent's dropping all the time. It's obviously a British writer, a British director, a British actor, and it just like they just did not nail sort of that New York Jewishness of a guy named Mankiewicz who his job was to write, to make money off of his pen in any way he possibly could because he was constantly in debt. Like that wonderful desperation that creates great art was missing from there. They turned it. They turned, and as a guy who writes for a living, they turned writing into sort of this. Oh my God! It's I have this sophisticated idea, and there's an origin story to my writing, and it one-on-one, and they literally gave him a Spider-Man origin. I'm gonna just rant. They gave him a Spider-Man origin story where he sees like literally there's an Uncle Ben character in the movie who dies, and he's like, now I know what I need to write about. And also, if you know anything about Mankiewicz was a right winger, not a left winger, and they present he was against he was against the unions very hard because of that, and he was against the entrance into World War II because of that. He was an
isolationist or whatever.
Yeah, he was an isolationist. He refused to talk about his own Jewish identity later in his life.
Wow,
and all that kind of stuff. So like they turned him into this sort of look. Nobody's more anti-Trump than I am, but the movie became they turned him into this sort of anti-Trumpish figure where they were kind of putting American politics on this person where it didn't quite fit, and so it wasn't about Mankiewicz, and it wasn't. That's the reason he wrote Citizen Kane wasn't because he saw a friend of his die in an election that didn't work out correctly because a guy like Trump almost got elected. Like that's not what happened. It was a much deeper story that him and Orson worked out together, and read the book. There's a book called The Brothers Mankiewicz, which is a very good book. Read that book about Joe and but anyways, that movie did not appeal to me at all. It was, I'm a super old Hollywood guy, you know that about me. It was very much about the glamour of the myth of old Hollywood. There's a scene at the very I'm ranting. There's a scene at the very beginning.
I like this. Go on.
Where all the writers, and it's all the most famous Hollywood writers, just happen to be on the MGM lot at the same time. And of course, they were never in the same room at the same time. And they're called into a meeting, and none of them have an idea, but they're going to bullshit it when they get there. And so one of them and then they play a little game. I was like, that's not at all how it fucking worked. Like that's not how writing works. You don't go into a meeting with your boss and have not one idea in your head, and then play a little like Algonquin game. Like that's not just. That's like a dream of what Hollywood is. I'm interested in what actual real Hollywood was. So that was my problem.
Yeah, you know what's crazy?
Rant, sorry.
It just no.
I loved it. If David Fincher wants to buy one of my properties, I loved it.
When a couple weeks ago, I love Dick Cavett interviews, and Dick Cavett is one of my interview gurus in terms of don't be afraid of tangents and going up to interesting esoterica as far as a conversation, because we learn more about the subject, the interviewee, when that happens. And he had John Houseman on, and it was in the 80s, and it was when the Paper Chase TV series was going on. But if people don't know, Houseman was a big producer of a lot of Orson Welles' works, including Citizen Kane. Yeah. And even in the 80s, Cavett asks him, okay, who really wrote Citizen Kane, Mankiewicz or Welles? He's like, they both wrote it, but it's Welles's vision. He had, being the director, he had final say. And he's like, many talented people helped him with Citizen Kane. Greg Toland, the cinematographer, for example, and certainly Mankiewicz. But that said, it's Orson's movie. It's Orson's film. I believe John Houseman. He was in the room. He's had his run-ins. He had his run-ins with Welles over the years where they disagreed, and yet I'll take John Houseman's opinion on that. I still want to see Mank because knowing all that, I'm okay with watching some fluffy fiction. It is disappointing though, because one of my co-hosts on the radio saw Raging Bull, saw the movie. Really thought that's like a documentary. And it's like, well, it's based on Jake LaMotta's book, but two things. One, it's one man's point of view, and also Jake's an asshole. And so he's going to make himself the hero of his own story. But the reality was Jake LaMotta was an asshole, and he always was, and he wasn't a pleasant man. I got to meet him several times in his 80s and into his 90s, and he wasn't a nice guy. He was a great fighter, but that doesn't. And this co-host was interviewing him on our TV show, and he really was treating the movie like it was a documentary. Cinderella Man is another fun movie, but there's a shit ton of fiction in that movie. And again, I say this as a boxing historian, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, that's not true. I like it from an entertainment standpoint, but I know it's full of shit. And again, it's a fun movie that's full of shit, but there's a lot of fiction in there, and Ron Howard took a lot of liberties. And in fact, we even had Ron on our on Sporting News Radio, the sports network I worked on, and I'm like, you've got to ask him about these aspects of the movie. And then the movie had already been out for a while, so it wasn't spoilers. But I'm like, this isn't true. And he said, we needed, like, for instance, Max Berry made Max Berry a real asshole in the movie. And the champion that Jim Braddock beats for the title. And it's like, no, Jim Braddock, I mean, Max Berry didn't take him seriously. That part's true. But he wasn't an asshole. And he's like, we needed a villain. And Max was the champion, so we made Max more of a villain. But in fact, Max Baer Jr., Jethro from the Beverly Hillbillies, was very upset with the movie because he's like, hey, they're portraying my father in an unfavorable light. And all the old men that knew Max Baer that I talked to were like, Max was a great guy. That's not the way to play him and stuff. So I did an interview separately from the Ron Howard one with Jethro, with Max Jr. And I'm like, plead your dad's case. I'm like, I want to hear from you. You know your father. Tell me about your father. And it was a great interview, and I'm really glad we did it. So there it is.
I just think you're making a movie where you're trying to explain a person's heart, and you're talking about Orson Welles, who made the movie about explaining a person's heart. And the conclusion of that movie is it about the sled or not about the sled? That makes it so deep, right? Like, that's what makes freaking Citizen Kane. You're like, the sled burns. Oh, it was about his childhood, but was it? The last line is, I guess you never get to know. Like but then you make a movie and you're like, actually, there is a way to know a person. Here's an origin story, and here's a thing that happened, and here's why it's like literally like what makes this thing awesome is it's not like the world can't just be mapped out. People are complicated, and then like Mank's like, no, people aren't that complicated. Here's the answers. Like it's like almost like an anti. It's like you raise a question as opposed to answer. I was watching a Lubitsch film, Design for Living.
Love Lubitsch. Go on.
Yeah, which is a great movie.
What a filmmaker. Yeah.
Which has a shocking ending to this day, where the girl ends up with both men, and then kisses them both at the end. Which is today, even today, it would show where they decide to become a throuple at the end. But there's a scene at the beginning. Where they have a playwright character, and he's sitting at a typewriter, and he writes something, and he thinks it's so great, and he reads it out loud, and he's telling the cat, and then he puts it down. He's like, no, now I hate it. And then he throws it out, and then it actually goes back, and then he sits down on the couch for 2 hours. He's like, and then he goes back and he writes it. He's like, yeah, now it's great, but no, it's crap. Like that 5 minutes of him just struggling was so much more real than a guy lying in bed being like, I must miswrite the perfect sentence, or else I will not get my alcohol for the evening. Give me more tea. Like it was just like their writing is a very, it's in some levels. I mean, we're all very fancy and thoughtful of it, but it's really a blue collar profession. It's about getting your hands dirty and getting it wrong and redoing, and it's not brilliance. It's not being about struck by lightning. It's about work.
Okay, I like it. That's all very good. While I'm looking through other questions, we can get back to the fact that Supergirl just came out, and again, it's a great start, and this is, of course, she needs to be the hero of her own story, and this obviously very much places her in an interesting alien world, and a very unique status quo that it'll be fun to see her unravel the problems that are in this miniseries.
Did you read the first issue, John?
I did.
Was it True Grit in Space? Or were you like, oh, Tom's just stealing Rooster Cockburn?
What's that? No.
It's True Grit in Space.
I didn't notice that it was True Grit.
You didn't notice it? Oh,
that's fantastic.
People.
That's fantastic.
It was,
I love that. Now I'm going to have to reread it and see True Grit in there. That's fantastic.
It goes away from, it doesn't go away from that premise, but that's it's very much based on sort of the original Portis novel. And I had originally pitched it as a True Grit thing with Supergirl as the mentee, and I was like, maybe we can use Lobo as the Rooster Cogburn character, and like, So she slowly gets grizzled as it goes on. And my editor, Jamie Rich, a brilliant editor, who just left DC, was like,
Yeah.
what if Supergirl is Rooster? Like, what if she is the? And I was like, and then that's when the whole story clicked. Like, I was kind of playing with things, and I was like, oh wait, like Supergirl doesn't need to be made into John Wayne. She already is John Wayne. Like, she's already been through the shit. She's already grizzled. She's already seen the world. That's when the whole thing clicked, and I was like, oh yeah, Supergirl is Rooster Cogburn. Like, she's cynical a little bit, and she's been in 5,000 fights, and is tired of people asking her about them, and is tired of people asking her about her cousin, and
Yes,
and tired of people thinking she's precious, and she'll say a few swear words, and she'll get a little drunk. And I was like, okay, you're right. That's what this is, and that's when it clicked into place. When I was like, I'm working with John Wayne, and that's how it went.
Well, that I did see in terms of it is great that she is this mature hero, and I do love that. And honestly, it's the one thing from the New 52, the tweak on Supergirl, that no, actually she was older. And it kind of makes her own character. I didn't like that there was animosity during the New 52 years between her and Superman. That bothered me. But I do like, and certainly they carried it through in the TV show as well, that it's like, no, actually she was the older character when Superman was a baby and stuff, and she was just, cryogenically or however, or just through space travel, came to Earth younger. And that Superman was an adult. So I do. That
was Otto Bender's original idea, to go back to our guy.
Wow, and I didn't realize that either. But yeah, that she did live, and I guess that makes sense with Argo City and stuff. But yeah, she's lived more of the Kryptonian life than Superman. Obviously, Superman left as a baby. She left as a teenager. So she kind of does know how the Kryptonian society works.
And that comes from, maybe he didn't invent that, but I called Steve Orlando as soon as I sort of got into this gig, because he had done some great work on Supergirl.
Yeah, no, I love Steve's run, sure.
And Steve and I talked about it, and he was the one who was like, that's the thing about Kara, is that Clark was born here. He's an immigrant who never knew his son. He was literally like he was in a womb and it opened in Kansas.
Right.
Supergirl was 14. She had friends on Krypton. She had a family on Krypton. She knew where the local store was. She knew, and when the planet broke apart, when the Holocaust happened, she witnessed it. And not only did she witness it once, but in the original Otto Bender telling, which is why I like to go back to Origins, she witnessed it 3 times. Because first she gets blown off the planet, sees her planet blow off. Then she's on the planet. Everyone starts dying of cancer because the ground is turning into kryptonite, and so they cover the ground with metal, with sheet metal of lead, so that's 2 Holocausts she's witnessed. Then asteroids go into the sheet metal, and then everyone starts dying again. And that's when she shows 3 Holocausts she witnessed by the time she's 14 and lands on a planet. And then she gets there, and her younger cousin is now her older cousin.
Right.
I mean, this is someone who's been through some shit, and I think that's just fascinating for her character.
I completely agree. First of all, Carlos Aguilar has an interesting suggestion. Love the first issue. Wondering if old 70s comics like Conan and Red Sonja were an influence on the vibe of the book.
Yes, 100%. At the same time I was coming up with Supergirl, this is super nerdy, I was reading a comics, one of the Tomorrow's Publishing. Oh, stupid brains is farting on it. But they did a special Conan issue where they did the top 50 Conan comics of all time. And I had not read a lot of Conan comics growing up. I was a very superhero-y guy. And so I was sitting there, as I was on vacation, I was reading these sort of synopses as well. I was like, these sound fascinating. Like, those so comic book world I'd never explored before. And so I went on the internet and ordered, whatever the top, as many as I could find in trade. And, I was reading these Roy Thomas, Gil Kane, John Buscema, and I was just like, man, this is a fun world, man. A guy, and I've always loved it. I loved the Schwarzenegger movie where he moves the thing around, and so when I was starting Supergirl, I was like, what world does she start on? I was like, let's start on a Conan world.
Yeah.
And do some, be in a bar and have. I was also listening to you talk to Jim Zub, who has such passion for that character, and
Jim loves Conan and obviously does a great job with Conan. Absolutely.
and that was leaking into me too, sort of Jim's
Cool.
passion for it. Like it was, so I went and read Jim's comics and yeah, and so all that stuff leaked into the beginning of this story to start on a Conan-ish planet. And of course, if to put Supergirl on a Conan-ish planet, that wouldn't be too funny because she could beat everyone up. So you put a red sun involved, get her drunk.
Yes.
And so she has less powers, and then it turns into a story. And poor Crypto, yeah.
Poor Crypto, that broke my heart. My God.
But he's a hero, man. He got up, just trying to save his friend.
Oh yeah. Gore Vidal wants to know what you think of earlier Supergirl runs. He's been rereading Joe Kelly's 2006 Supergirl as a sexually provocative 16-year-old who drinks and parties and knows she's attractive to men. Absolutely.
I read a few. I like the Peter David run, which is the weirdest run.
It is the weirdest run.
Because she's like an ectoplasmic space angel.
Yep.
But Peter David knows how to tell a long-term story, man. There's a reason that guy wrote Hulk for 15 years.
Yep.
And the Gary Frank art is wonderful. So I read that. I read a lot of the old Binder stuff. I actually went back to the 70s stuff, the adventure comic stuff, like with art by like Art Saf and Sikowski,
and even Vinnie Coletta.
And Vinnie Coletta doing it, and like so that stuff that's written by like Carrie Bates, and a lot of it's like anonymous. Probably Kupperberg did some. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think you're right, actually, because he did write a ton of Superman family stories all over the up and down. Yes.
And those stories, I mean, they have their interest. I mean, they're of their time, and there's always a sort of a romance kind of writing for girls, what they thought was writing for girls at the time angle to them. But those stories were interesting. The Jeff Loeb stuff, with the Mike Turner, the art is gorgeous, and again, those are a little dated, because I don't think it was a little more exploitative than we do now, but the stakes were super high and super cool. And Dan DiDio, I mean, that was one of his best instincts, one of his best calls, and I'm sure he'll tell you that when he just looked at Supergirl and was like, "What is this? No, Supergirl is Superman's cousin. Get rid of all that other stuff."
Yeah,
and just be like, and bring that back. Supergirl is Superman's cousin, and they're pals. And that was DiDio's big insight, and I think and you can never lose track of that. Like, don't make her too complicated that you lose that coolness.
Well, unfortunately, when Byrne came in the 80s, he just dismantled, literally decades of creation, people like Otto Binder and the like. I mean, again, when Wade and I were talking a couple days ago, Crisis really screwed up the Legion. And that's okay, because, it makes sense from a time travel standpoint that if the present changes, the future will likely change. But unfortunately, we lose a lot of really great things. I love the Supergirl Brainiac 5 relationship, and I was bummed that went away.
Me too. Yeah. No, me too. There's one of the best issues of Legion Superheroes is the Baxter run is Legion 50, where they go and they kill Time Trapper and the reason Brainiac agrees to sort of do this evil plot is because Time Trapper killed Supergirl. And sort of
yes.
And it's just so emotional to see him screaming in Time Trapper's face, being like, "You took my love." Yeah. Yes. So I couldn't agree more. Yeah. I wish you'd ask Mark. A lot of that stuff is confusing to me. I feel like they could have, I don't know. But even the 5-year Legion is weird, because if you read that book stuff now, they start out of continuity with issue 1, and then in 5 they reinvent all continuity again. It's real. My son was really annoyed by it. It's like they establish a very hard continuity because nobody has superhero names, and this, and then issue 5 they have Mordru destroy the timeline and rebuild it, and then it has a different time. In 6 they start over again.
I have a feeling maybe that was a DC executive decision. I had forgotten about that. Now that you say it,
I agree that's sort of their. I don't know. It was more strict back then. But yeah, it don't talk to the Crisis messed things up for a lot of things, but it was a really great book. And Barb's.
I mean, it's a great. I love that story. It's a terrific. I love that story. Suddenly I'm Pee-wee. But I do, but that said, it really ripped a lot of great continuity from DC, and it took them decades to decide to come back. That's why I'm so positive with what Josh has presented with Infinite Frontier and all the other writers and stuff. And I can't remember the name of it, but that story that was at the beginning of the year where it was 1939 Batman and Legion and classic Silver Age Superboy, and just this great mishmash of heroes together solving a problem. And it's like, no, I would love it if Wade had a great idea to do a Superboy story set in Smallville with Chief Parker and Ma and Pa either on the farm or at the general store. That's fine. That's why, and it's funny because Mark mentioned how much he loves Miracle Monday, the great Elliot Maggin novel. Personally, I love Last Son of Krypton even more because there's some great early Superboy moments. It's the best Silver Age novel about Superman that was ever written. And it was, as people might know if they saw the interviews that I've done with Elliot over the years, it was they couldn't novelize the film. So instead, Elliot got the opportunity to write this Last Son of Krypton novel and then subsequently Miracle Monday. And he eventually got the rights to be able to represent them. So if you buy them now, you can buy new versions, at least from a cover standpoint, but it's still the same story that Elliot wrote, and Elliot gets all the money, which is great. That's why I'm excited to talk to Paul Kupperberg about his Justice Society novel that's kind of similar that way. So, I'm big fan. Yeah, okay, Generations, I guess was what it was called. Thank you, Marcello. I appreciate that. That's funny. Yeah, and I agree. Mark Waid's and Barry Kitson's Legion run with Supergirl is fantastic.
That's also fantastic. You're right.
So people are asking too, how did you get together with I don't even know how to say it. Is it Bill
Bilquis Evely is what I say. How did I get together with her? It was just winning the lottery. Sometimes you win the lottery and sometimes you don't. We were looking for an artist for Supergirl, and I think it must have been the first one. My editor reached out to me and said, "What do you think about Bilquis?" And I just said, if she said yes, say yes before she says no. Yeah, no, it was the best thing ever. Her work in sort of the Sandman universe. I thought she was going to win the Eisner last year. I think she should have for Best Artist, and I'm sure she'll win many more in her career. And so it was nothing more than kiss. And she's wonderful to work with. You saw how beautiful the art is in number one. It only gets even better going forward. And she's fast. She's cool. Working through issue 5 now. People don't know I now write my books differently than I used to. Again, blame Brad Meltzer. I write my books as novels now. I write them all in a row just 'cause I got so far ahead in the pandemic. Now I have the ability to do that. So Supergirl's done. Issue 1 through 8 are all written.
Great.
I write them all that way. If I get to the end and didn't like something at the beginning, I can go back and adjust it. Which you could never do in Batman. Be like, I'm on issue 85. I should have issue 1. So it makes to me, it makes for a better complete story. It makes you sort of be able to raise the stakes. So she has all 8 scripts, so she knows exactly where it's going and she knows what's happening. And she's, we should be coming out on time for a while. Knock on some wood.
Very cool. Mario asked, did we either of us read the Tom DeHaven at Superman? Yes, I did.
I did too. Very good.
Great. Outstanding. And it's, Matt Wagner always says, and he's right, these characters work best if you keep them in the time frame in which they were created. And It's Superman absolutely is a 1938 Superman story. And that is part of the appeal to me, is going back to the beginnings like that. And it kind of really gets to the essence of what Siegel and Schuster were trying to do. So I really like that. Raphael says, with Strange Adventures and Rorschach wrapping up shortly, can you give us a hint of your next DC project?
I have a few next DC projects coming up. I have a whole 12-issue series that's been done and is being drawn. That's it's a Black Label thing in the style of Strange Adventures and Vision and Mr. Miracle. And I have another shorter series that's being drawn that'll come out soon. And I'm working on another. So I have a time. I can't give really any good hints. I don't know.
Okay.
They're so beautifully drawn. This next series I'm thinking of is it's like Strange Adventures with an off-center character, and it'll be, with the exception of all the books I'm currently working on, it'll be the best drawn book of next year. I can't speak highly enough of the art that I've seen. It'll blow your mind.
Kit Kat Sneak Attack says obviously he has to read the DeHaven book. It's sitting on his shelf. He found a used copy at a secondhand store. I even have the Audible of It's Superman. That's how much I love that book. Yeah, big time. Big time.
Yeah, I love it. That book came out
like 10 years ago.
Here's an odd hiccup an odd hiccup in my life. So in between Iraq and Afghanistan, I really was didn't know what to do with my life. I was, in my mid 20s and and I always wanted to go into comic books. And my mother was an executive at Warner Brothers. And I was like, what if I'm ready to leave this? My mother really hated the CIA. She was this, liberal. She's like, what are you doing starting wars over there? I was like, no, I'm trying to end wars. So I was like, is there a way in? And my mother kindly got me an interview with DC Comics to go work for them. And I was like, it was still my dream to work in comics. And I got an interview I couldn't get an interview in DC Comics proper, but I got interviewed for publishing, using, I don't even know what it was called at the time, like special publishing or something. And they're the people who published Tom DeHaven's book. And so I went to an interview with this guy. He was very nice. And he's like, look, we're just looking for someone to be an assistant to it. It was a very low level editor position. And I was like, oh, this is my foot in the... And at the time I was a rising case officer. I was doing very well. But so this would have been like the job you'd get when you were 21 and I was art. And anyway, in the door, and I remember asking, I was like, does anybody go from your office into comic books writing? He goes, no, that never happens. Like thank God, like he was very blunt with me, being like, no, there is a wall up around comics. Like we are auxiliary publishing and we don't touch comic books at all. And so I read It's Superman because they had published that and I wanted to show up for the interview too. So I read that for the book so I could talk to him about it. And then the offer was on the table and it was to move to New York. My wife, we were in DC. My wife was going to law school here. And so it would have fumbled our whole life up. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I guess I'm letting this comic book dream go. This is the end of my comic book dream.
Wow.
I'll be in the CIA for the rest of my life.
Funny how things work out. Yeah.
Funny how things work out.
Interesting. Pumpkin Time loved the fact that you added Dr. Fate in Strange Adventures. I got so excited. I agree. I
did that because Mitch wanted to draw him.
That's cool. That's all right.
Before each issue, I asked Mitch and Doc, what do you want to draw?
Sure.
Mitch is of course on Earth, so he can be like, I want to draw this superhero and this superhero, and Doc's like, well, you put me on this other planet. What am I to say? I want to draw a black rock instead of a gray rock. Thanks a lot. So within the confines of where they are. So Mitch said he wanted to draw Doc Strange. He wanted to draw Green Arrow. That's why he's got to see them all there.
The complexity of Alana that you've put on her in this story, I honestly, the last person I would have expected to have this depth and be compelled to follow her story. It's as much her story as it is Adam's story. And that's great. And I really do love it. And I love the politics behind and that's not to say that, or just, it's interesting because it is kind of fake news in its own way, but it, has nothing to do with really, as far as the culture wars go, or does it? I don't know.
No, I mean, we've talked about this before. I write books in generations, and the current generation of books, which is ending, which is Rorschach and Strange Adventures and Batcat to a lesser extent, they're books about evil. They're books about the existence of evil in our world and how it drives us insane, and makes us angry. They're books that are written from places of anger. So they're not political in any sense of like Mank is, where I'm like, here's an exact Trump allegory and here's why Trump is bad, because that's just dumb and that's not how I write. You can read an op-ed. Why would you want to read a comic book instead? Op-eds are much cheaper. But just like 1984 is not about, if you read that book, it's not about Nazism or communism. It's about totalitarianism. Like he's writing, Orwell's writing about the big movements of his time, but he's not writing about them directly. He's writing about like the themes behind these movements and what they do to people. I'm not saying I'm Orwell, but fuck, try, right?
Hell yeah.
So So these books are political, but they're just sort of not directly political. Supergirl, on the other hand, was written in a different era at a different time, and is supposed to be my sort of first 2021 book. It's written from a place of hope. It's written from a place of adventure. It's written from a place of like the roaring 20s are coming. Let's roar, you know. So it's a different kind of book.
That's cool. Now, here, I like what Greg is asking. What's up with your ellipses? Why use those as opposed to breaking up dialogue into separate word balloons or with periods?
I break up dialogue into lots of separate rooms of balloons. I use ellipses. I blame this on John. This is John's fault. I've told this before. John, when I was listening to Word Balloon, about 2009-ish, John Hickman wrote in, just as you were writing in now, to Bendis tapes and said, what's an ellipses in comics as opposed to a dash? And Bendis responded, an ellipses is when you don't know the next thought, and so you kind of try to catch it, but you're kind of not getting it. And it's a trailing off, and a dash is when you just stop talking and something cuts you off. So I use ellipses when people are kind of ahhing or hemming or hawing. It's a way to show acting. I stole it from Bendis and from Hickman asking about Bendis. Yeah, it's a way of being like.
Kit Kat Sneak Attack likes the ellipses. It makes the beats more clear.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get this voice inside your head, you know. It's like that Grant Morrison from Multiplicity thing where it's like, I'm in your head. You just read this sentence and I control your brain. It's that kind of thing.
Carlos wants to know what he's curious about is how's Adam Strange going to recover from this amazing book, but I feel bad for anyone who tries to do something with him later.
If you think issue 10 was intense, wait till you see issue 11. I mean, issue 11 is Alana, who is, we have established, is a woman who fights, who just found out that her daughter is alive and being hid from her by this Adam Strange. He's been alive, and they have a confrontation that's, you know, I mean, that's like two gods fighting on Olympus, but they're two superheroes fighting in Phoenix. It's what happens going forward is both 11 and 12, I would say, are both like event issues, you know, like big things, you know, changing things, what happens next.
Very exciting. Honestly, as I've told you a million times, I loved reading Silver Age Adam Strange stories as a kid. I loved when the Kuberts brought Adam Strange back. And almost every iteration. Andy Diggle's Adam Strange miniseries, I really enjoyed that years ago. I loved what they did with him in 52, and just the idea, especially that, holy shit, he's blind, and, you know, God, what's going to happen to him?
Since we're here and we're talking Adam Strange, I'm going to do something which is entirely in my own self-interest, and I apologize for it in advance. But slightly not. If you're an Eisner voter, if you're a librarian, if you're a comic book store owner, or you work at a comic book store, or you're an artist who's worked on a comic book, there's a huge wide variety of you people who can log on to Eisner.com and vote. I think Strange Adventures has the best art in comics. I think Mitch and Doc are amazing, and I think it's a very hard comic to pull off because you have two artists who have to work exactly in sync within the same page and thematically, and they deserve that Eisner. And if you go online and vote for them, I would be eternally grateful. If you're there and you happen to also say it's the best series, I would also like that, but I benefit from it, so I should endorse it.
Do fans don't vote for Eisners, do they?
No. Like I said, it's librarians, it's if you're comic book store owners or workers, and professionals, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So that's sort of the list. So I would be extremely. I know. I mean, like it helps because I want Strange Adventures to be even bigger story. I want to pitch it to Hollywood. I want to do this, and to be the Eisner winning Strange Adventures, it makes it easier for all that stuff.
Wow, that would be an amazing Adam Strange story. I even loved that Adam Strange was used in Krypton, and the way he was used in Krypton. I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, we can wrap up, buddy. I mean, I'm keeping you up late, and we're well over 2 hours. It's up to you.
Yeah. I guess
if there's any other.
Lord knows, I just asked for votes. I must be getting desperate at the end of the evening.
So Mikey says he's already voted for Strange Adventures. That's fantastic.
Mikey, you're the best, dude.
As a comic shop owner, Tom
find me at a con. so I can sign some books for you. No, I should not have been nominated for Best Writer. I had very little comics come out in 2020. It was the gap between Batman. First of all, the people who were nominated were very good. They should have gotten more than white dudes to just be nominated. They should have found some. I think that, but I mean, every single person who got nominated is someone I respect and love. So I'm not going to complain too much.
I hear you, man. And again, I think thankfully there are people of color. There are women that are writing and drawing exceptional books. There are people of color that are doing the same. And I do think that thankfully the wheel is turning.
Yeah, so, the wheels. I mean, I can't argue with any of the nominations. I'm not going to say nobody there deserved it. I think they all deserved it. I think Donny Cates should have also been on the list. I love Donnie's work this year. It's another white guy, so I'm not making anyone's life easier. There are incredible. There's incredible diversity in our medium. We need to spotlight it, or else we're not doing our jobs right.
Agreed. Great talk, buddy. As always, I like where we went, and I'm looking forward to the wrap-ups of Rorschach and Strange Adventures, and we're only at the beginning of Supergirl. Batcat about a third of the way through. Was that 5 issues? So was it 12?
5 issues. We're almost half.
Almost halfway there.
Half, yeah. No, Batcat. There's we have the JP Leon annual too, which
yes,
we'll get to eventually.
Yeah, and God, and truly, you were on the call with me when we had the panel honoring John for Bill Cox's Comics Arts online show. It's on the Word Balloon channel, everybody, if you haven't had a chance to watch it or listen to it. And that's kind of John's last pages and stuff. So it's gonna be great when that comes out. Yeah, it's a tough loss, and we can't believe it. I mean, God, it's barely been 6 weeks since he's passed, and it's just a shock.
My comments are better put there when I said them better than I could now. So yeah, obviously all that stuff. But I what a joy talking to you, John. It's always a joy. It's fun just shooting this shit with you. And say thank you again for the content you're putting out. I don't say it enough. I listened to that Wade conversation. I was listening to your voice, listening to you talk comics, listening to your passion. It calms me down, man. It's a stressful fucking world out there.
Thanks,
and so I can't tell you how much. I just enjoy what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, the only reason why I have great shows is I have great guests. And thankfully, having done this for 16 years, I'm able to have a good rapport with people. Mark is really like one of my favorite people in terms of early on, and you might already know this. He was really like, do we have to go for an hour? Can we do it like in 30 or 40 minutes? I'm like, fine. And I'd always do that. And it was so funny because literally during this talk now, I'm like, we're at an hour and 15. Do you want to wrap? He's like, no, I can take a few more. And it's like, oh, thank God we've reached that point in our friendship. So thankfully, Art and Franco really helped solidify my friendship with Mark because he loves those guys. And it just invariably, if we're all at a convention, we'll have at least one meal together, kind of like us. And so it's been great getting to know Mark and I mean, again, and also, Mark and I are about the same age. He's, around, I don't know if he's slightly older or slightly younger. I can't remember, but that's the thing. We kind of grew up with the same influences. And as you know, like nothing delights me more than the fact that Howard Chaykin enjoys talking to me. And that just blows my mind. So yeah, I mean, honestly, like this was a really good week. Never talked to Ron Friends before. We had an amazing conversation that I haven't put out on audio yet, but I will this weekend. I'm putting out the Chaykin audio as well this weekend as well. Oh, Mario wanted to know, do you ever listen to when it's Art Franco and me on the Oh Yeah podcast?
I listened to your Walt Simonson interview.
Oh, there you go.
Because I wanted to hear Walt talk. But
sure. No, they're great. They're fun. That's our dick around show where we just, we let Artie spin for like 10 minutes talking about whatever, and we all have our little stories. And I love Franco and Ed Scott McMahon, great artist and stuff, and he always has fun stuff. And also Mike Campoboso, Skokie Spidey, and Mike Nagan, our dear convention friend from Reed.
Love Mike.
One of the great, sweetest guys in comics. So yeah,
he gave me my first breaks because he let me into cons when I was just a stupid. But he read my book. I cannot believe he read my stupid novel and let me into cons when I did no right being there. So yeah, Mike. I owe Mike from way back.
I'm assuming and maybe this was before that, but that's kind of when you and I met when Fowler introduced me to you.
I wouldn't have been at that con without Mike. I'm sure. Yeah, probably.
That's cool. Probably right. That's fantastic. Do you own any John Paul Leon art?
I do. I have the cover that's on the trade for Sheriff, which is my favorite cover from that, which is the two people hugging. Yeah, I have I can't bring it down because it's on the wall, but yeah, it's very Mitch and I were at New York Comic Con, and the issue 1 cover, which is a cover I love from Sheriff, was there, and it wasn't even that expensive. I can't imagine. I think it was like $700 or something. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, I'm going to come back and buy this. And I went back, and I'm not sure I told Mitch about it or we talked about it, but before I knew it, Mitch had it in his hands. He's like, sucker! So Mitch has the number 1 cover for Sheriff. I have the better cover. I have the cover of the trade.
That happened with me and Artie Baltazar with a piece of Jose Luis Garcia Lopez art. And it was this great shot of Superman flying over Metropolis. And I'm like, I'm going to buy this from you tomorrow. And by the time it came back, he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, we sold it. And I was like, look what I got, sir. I'm like, son of a bitch. I got other Jose Luis Garcia Lopez art, so I'm okay. But yeah, I was like, oh, I really wanted that. God damn it.
I have none of his art. It's going. Did you see the sale from yesterday? I know we're wrapping up in here.
Tell me. No, we're cool.
The Wally Wood sale. The wall just came down yesterday in comic book art.
There was a Wally Wood sale?
There was a Wally Wood cover. If not the best Wally Wood cover, it was an EC cover. It was a big buxom lady, but it went for $750,000. It went for $850,000.
Wow. Was it a heritage auction or whatever?
It was a heritage auction, yeah. So that's unprecedented in comic. Like, I would think, looking at that, I would think like a similar page like it sold 3 years ago for $90,000. So imagine in 3 years it went up to from 90 to 100 to 860. The Wall Street has discovered comic book art.
Yes.
And it's depressing for us
right.
low life creators. Because now it's become like like it used to be just like there were like 2 or 3 objects that Wall Street cared about in comics. It was like Superman 1, Action 1, and
sure.
Detective 27, and those kept going up astronomically. And we're like, okay, that's their business. But now they've expanded their interest in our profession. And
well, because of the movies and the TV and stuff, and key issues are now getting ridiculous prices. A lot of my buddies that helped me put on these online conventions last year have really tutored me in the original art world, and also buying rare comics and stuff. And they were telling me too that West Coast Avengers cover with the white Vision was always an affordable book in like the hundreds, under $1,000, and it immediately jumped up into mid 4 figures after being in WandaVision and that moment being exploited. I, in fact, bought that Silver Age imaginary story about Superman's sons. One is superpowered, one is not, just like the TV show. I bought it because it was one of my favorite issues, and bought a reader copy, very, very reasonable, around $20 or whatever. I won't deny that part of me is like, I wonder if this is going to go up in value now because of Superman and Lois. Because again, God, as Rich always in Bleeding Cool always covers this, Wonder Woman flying is now a key issue. And that went for a ridiculous amount of money all of a sudden. It's very interesting. I keep meaning to have somebody on from Heritage to talk about that in general. I don't know who I should talk to specifically. And again, I should talk to my online guys that are helping me out with the shows and stuff. They would probably have the best idea.
They had the Phantom Lady. It's called the Headlights cover for people who know comics. But it was what Wortham uses sort of an example of comics that were too
overly
racy.
Sexualized.
Yes, and it's Matt Baker, who's in my opinion maybe the best artist in comics history. Up there in top 5. But anyways, that famous cover, you could buy it. Maybe it was a $9,600, $12,000. I mean, it would be expensive so it sold today at Heritage.
The Golden Age comic, yeah. So go on.
It's not a number 1. It's not a first appearance. It's just famous because it has a racy cover. It sold for $500,000. So.
Wow. I had Gary, and I'm blanking on his last name, but Moondog Comics was a great chain of stores here in Chicago, and he owned the Ashcan for Action Comics.
Oh, really? The
And
original.
he's in his 70s, and he made a nice high six-figure sum from the sale. It's just the trademark of Action Comics. So there's a witch on the cover, and it's this black and white ash can that, as you know, and for people who don't know, ash cans never saw the light of day as far as hitting the newsstands. They were just created to create a trademark for something. And that was great. And also, Gary's a great guy. And, there's a nice little retirement package for him where it's like, yeah, here you go, man. So, that's funny. Here, Mike Conrad says, I got a CGC Werewolf by Night 32 a few years ago. It's worth a fair amount now that I paid for it. I'm assuming that's the first appearance of Moon Knight. I'll never sell it. My kids will have to fight over it when I croak. I hear you, man. Guy, there was a great episode of Pawn Stars where a woman walked in with Werewolf by Night and the first appearance in Moon Knight. And I was very impressed that whoever their researchers are, and also the expert that came in, is like, this is a $40,000 book. And it's like, good for you. Because yes, it is. And it certainly will be when the Moon Knight TV series finally happens. Someone asked earlier what you thought of WandaVision. And I should ask you just in general, what have you thought of the Marvel shows, if you've had time to watch them?
I watched WandaVision. I haven't seen the other two.
Okay.
What I thought of, it's so complicated. My major thought, the major thing is my kids, you kind of live for those moments, that sort of that moment where a kid sees you as something cool. Like when you're little, when they're babies and you're like, look, I can jingle keys. You're like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking superhero.
You're a god.
And then when they're 6 years old and you can make a basket and they can't, they're like, how do you throw a basketball into a basket? I love you. And, but then when my kids now are 11 and 12 and now they're better than basketball, we play video games, we play Smash, they kick the crap out of me, play, Mario Kart, they lap me. It's, they see less and less use for me. So when I watch WandaVision and at the end it comes on and says, thank you for Tom King, and the creator of WandaVision, called me on the phone and said that, it wouldn't have happened without my kids, like had that feeling on like I was jingling the keys again. Like that's what I felt about WandaVision. It gave me one of those moments again. That's my major thought. I liked it overall, but for me, the emotion of that, nothing will surpass that.
That's great, man. And I know Brian has told me the same thing when his youngest son, Logan, figured out London. Pardon me, not Logan, London. Yeah. And it's like, you write Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Are you going to write Spider-Man today? Yes, I am. And it's just, that's amazing. And I can appreciate that. Yeah, that's got to be a great feeling as a father. And that, hey, your kids still know you can do magic. That's amazing.
Yeah, that was my thought. I can't wait to watch Loki.
It's really good.
Everyone's raving about it.
Yeah.
Boy, he looks like John Slattery. I'm doing a Mad Men rewatch. So,
well, what's funny? I thought that was John Slattery, but it's actually Owen Wilson.
I know, he looks just like him, right? Yeah.
When I was expecting him to be Howard Stark, and that's why I was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And it's like, "Oh no, he's somebody different." Fantastic.
Yeah, he's modeled after Mark Grunwald. Everyone's saying that's what.
Oh, that's funny, and I suppose so. And it's interesting because it's, as we're recording this, it's Mark's birthday today.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. God, I love Jason's Heroes Reborn Squadron Supreme story that he was doing, or that he is doing in Marvel. I think that's
me too. I really like that issue. I read
really good. Yeah,
no, everything Jason does is great.
Exactly. God damn him. No,
if a bunch of comic boys sitting around there, all like, "What's our favorite comic boy?" We all say Jason. So fuck that guy.
Yeah, he's and again, there was another guy that I hadn't talked to in a couple of years, other than seeing him at conventions. And we sat down a couple of months ago before Heroes Reborn started, and I'm like, "Dude, I miss you." He's like, "I miss you too." And I'm like, "All right, good." I'm like, "That's good to hear." So. No, again, I am very fortunate. I am talking to one of my best friends in comics right now. And really, in these 16 years, and I hope I don't claim something that isn't true, but I've been very fortunate to, beyond having great conversations, becoming friends with a lot of my favorite people. And it means a lot.
We all talk so much shit behind your back. It's all an illusion.
Rightfully so. Absolutely. So anyway,
right.
Go to bed. Great talking to you. Thank you, everybody. Shelley Bond on Sunday afternoon, 3:00 Chicago time, so 4:00 Eastern. That'll be a great conversation. Paul Kupperberg on Monday. More Word Balloon Live coming up in the days ahead.